The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of cosmic energy. But what happens when something tears through the fabric of space itself, dragging with it a war from beyond the stars? A conflict that knows nothing of the Force, nothing of Jedi or Sith, only the brutal mathematics of survival and extermination. The anomaly appeared without warning in the Tatooine system's outer asteroid belt, a wound in reality that registered on no Imperial sensors, triggered no hyperspace alarms, and violated every known law of astrogation. It simply was asterisk, as if the universe had suddenly remembered a hole it forgot to mention. Through that breach came hell itself. The Terran Federation fleet carrier Ticonderoga exploded into real space, trailing fire and debris, her escort cruisers Gettysburg and Normandy flanking her damaged hull. But they weren't alone. Swarming across their hulls like a plague of chittering nightmares came the Arachnids, the bugs, thousands of warrior-form organisms clinging to armor plating, tearing through bulkheads, and launching themselves through the void with biologically impossible precision. The Federation ships fired everything they had: tactical nuclear missiles, railgun batteries, and streams of tracer fire that lit up the darkness like a deadly constellation. The Arachnids died by the hundreds, their bodies flash-freezing in the vacuum, but more kept coming, an endless tide of biological horror that had pursued the Federation fleet across light years and now through dimensions themselves. Captain James T. Harris of the Ticonderoga gripped his command console as another impact shook the bridge. Alarms screamed in harmony with dying crew members on lower decks. His tactical officer was shouting numbers that didn't matter anymore: hull integrity, casualty reports, ammunition expenditure rates that would see them dry in 30 minutes. "Sir, the wormhole's collapsing behind us." Navigation Officer Chen's voice cracked with exhaustion and terror. They'd been fighting for 16 hours straight, ever since the bug fleet caught them in the Zejima Beach system. "We're cut off from Federal space." Harris barely heard her. He was staring at the main view screen, at something that made absolutely no sense. Twin suns. This system had twin suns, one larger and yellow, the other smaller and orange. That was impossible. Their stellar cartography contained no binary systems in this vector, no Federation colonies within 10 light-years of their last known position, and certainly no planet like the desert world currently occupying their orbital path. "Where the hell are we?" he whispered. He never got his answer. The Imperial Star Destroyer Devastator translated from hyperspace 3,000 kilometers off their starboard bow. Grand Moff Tarkin stood on the bridge of his flagship, hands clasped behind his back, gray uniform immaculate despite the late hour. He'd been reviewing planetary subjugation reports from the outer rim when his sensor officer detected the spatial anomaly. Curious, he'd ordered an investigation. The Devastator was returning from Tatooine after confirming the location of the stolen Death Star plans, a matter that would soon involve Lord Vader personally, and Tarkin welcomed the distraction. What he found defied every expectation. "Report," Tarkin commanded, his voice sharp as a blade. The sensor officer, a young lieutenant whose name Tarkin hadn't bothered learning, stammered through his analysis. "3 unknown vessels, sir. Configuration unlike anything in Imperial or Rebel databases. They appear to be engaged in combat with," he trailed off, uncertainty replacing his usual crisp efficiency. "With what, Lieutenant?" Tarkin's tone could freeze plasma. "Organic matter, sir. Thousands of life-form readings, non-humanoid, moving across the hull of the damaged vessels. They're attacking the ships from outside." Tarkin stepped closer to the view screen. The image resolved into clarity, and for the first time in a decade, he felt something approaching surprise. The unknown vessels were blocky, utilitarian, covered in what appeared to be crude armor plating and bristling with kinetic weapon batteries. Primitive by Imperial standards, perhaps, but there was a brutal efficiency to their design. and swarming over them like insects on carrion were creatures. Large ones, moving with purpose and coordination despite the vacuum of space. Establish communication, Tarkin ordered. Standard Imperial frequencies. The communications officer worked her console, cycling through every known language protocol, every diplomatic channel in the Imperial database. Static, white noise, and then a sound, not language, a chittering, clicking cacophony that made several bridge officers flinch. It came from the creatures, not the ships. "Sir, I can't establish contact with the vessels. Their communication systems don't match any known." Incoming fire. The asterisk Ticonderoga had made its decision. Faced with an unknown massive warship that dwarfed even their fleet carrier, Captain Harris did what any Federation officer would do. He assumed hostile intent and opened fire. Railgun rounds, solid tungsten penetrators accelerated to relativistic velocities, hammered into the asterisk Devastator's asterisk forward shields. The Imperial ship barely registered the impacts, her ray shields dispersing the kinetic energy, but Tarkin's eyes narrowed. "Return fire," he said quietly. "Disable their weapon systems." The asterisk Devastator's asterisk turbolaser batteries spoke with the voice of Imperial superiority. Emerald lances of coherent energy stabbed across the void, each bolt carrying more destructive potential than a Federation tactical nuke. They struck the asterisk Ticonderoga asterisk amidships and the Federation carrier's armor, designed to withstand nuclear detonations and bug plasma, vaporized like morning dew. Secondary explosions rippled down her flank. Atmosphere vented in crystalline clouds. Entire decks simply ceased to exist. Harris felt his ship dying beneath him. Damage reports flooded in so fast the computer couldn't process them. Engineering was gone. Hangar bays 2 through 5, gone. Medical, gone. 3,000 mobile infantry troopers had just been atomized by weapons technology he couldn't begin to understand. "All hands abandon ship," his voice boomed through the internal comm. "This is not a drill. Proceed to escape pods immediately. Marines provide covering fire." The Arachnids made their move. Warrior bugs, each the size of a ground transport and equipped with razor mandibles that could shear through Starship plating, launched themselves from the dying asterisk Ticonderoga toward the new target. The Imperial Star Destroyer represented fresh prey, a new hive to infest, more of the strange two-legged creatures to feed upon. Brain bugs, safely nestled in the captured sections of the Federation ships, had already analyzed the tactical situation. This new vessel was powerful, dangerous, but it was also full asterisk of biomass. Over 2,000 warrior bugs crossed the void in a living wave of chitin and hunger. TIE fighters screamed from the asterisk Devastator's asterisk hangar bays, dozens of them, their twin-ion engines shrieking like predatory birds. Imperial pilots, veterans of 100 rebel engagements, found themselves facing an enemy their training had never prepared them for. The bugs had no ships to target, no engines to disable, no cockpits to strafe. They were the ships. They were the weapons. TIE fighter pilot designation. Omega 77 opened fire on the leading wave, his laser cannon stitching brilliant red lines through the vacuum. Bugs exploded, their internal fluids boiling away into space, but their companions simply flowed around the casualties like water around stones. One warrior bug collided with his wingman's TIE, mandibles closing on the spherical cockpit. The fighter crumpled like a tin can. Omega 77 screamed, into his comm, into the void, into the uncaring universe, and dove toward the bug swarm with all weapons blazing. He destroyed 11 before a hopper bug, smaller and faster, landed on his viewport. The last thing he saw was the creature's pointed proboscis punching through the transparasteel. On the asterisk Devastator's asterisk bridge, Tarkin watched the tactical display with cold calculation. His TIE fighters were taking losses, unacceptable losses, against an enemy that fought with mindless coordination. The unknown vessels continued to fire on his ship with their primitive kinetic weapons, apparently unable to distinguish between the Empire and their true enemy. And now, his shields were registering impacts from the creatures themselves, testing the ray shields with proboscis stingers and acidic excretions. "Intensify forward firepower," Tarkin commanded. "Destroy the damaged vessel before those creatures can use it as a staging platform, and ready the tractor beams. I want specimens of those organisms for Imperial research." The Asterisk Devastator's Asterisk main batteries spoke again. The Asterisk Ticonderoga Asterisk, already crippled and burning, took the full force of concentrated turbolaser fire meant to reduce planetary installations to rubble. Her reactor containment failed in a cascade of fusion fire that lit up the Tatooine system like a newborn star. The shockwave vaporized hundreds of bugs still clinging to her hull and sent the escort cruisers tumbling out of formation. Captain Harris died in that moment, along with 7,000 Federation personnel who'd served their mandatory term and earned their citizenship through blood. They never knew what killed them. They never understood they'd crossed into a galaxy where human civilization had already conquered the stars, where weapons could shatter planets, and where the Force itself watched their final moments with ancient, indifferent eyes. 60,000 kilometers away, hidden in the shadow of Tatooine's larger moon, the rebel listening post designated Echo 7 recorded everything. Lieutenant Kara Sindal had been monitoring Imperial comm traffic when her sensor board lit up like a festival display. The anomaly, the unknown ships, the Asterisk Devastator's Asterisk arrival, and then the battle, if it could be called a battle when one side possessed overwhelming technological superiority. "Get this to command immediately," she told her communications officer, a Bothan named Koth whose fur was standing on end with agitation. "Unknown vessels engaged by Imperial Star Destroyer. Heavy casualties on both sides. And there's something else. Biological entities, thousands of them, hostile to both the newcomers and the Empire." Koth's ears flattened against his skull. "You think they're rebel allies?" Sindal watched the tactical feed as more TIE fighters died, their wreckage adding to the debris field that now orbited Tatooine like a graveyard ring. She watched the unknown escort cruisers continue their futile assault on the Asterisk Devastator, watched the creatures, whatever they were, swarm across the Imperial ship's hull with horrifying determination, watched the cold mathematics of warfare play out in vacuum and violence. "I don't know what they are," she said quietly, "but the enemy of our enemy might be our friend, or they might be something worse. Either way, Alliance Command needs to know. Now." The message burst toward the rebel fleet in compressed hyperwave transmission, encoded with protocols that would take Imperial intelligence weeks to crack. It contained tactical data, sensor readings, and one critical observation that would change the course of the galactic civil war. New faction entered the conflict, capabilities unknown, allegiance unknown, threat level extreme. By the time the remaining Federation forces retreated to Tatooine's upper atmosphere, they'd lost 60% of their combat strength. The Gettysburg and Normandy limped away from the engagement trailing atmosphere and fluids, their hulls scarred with turbolaser burns and bug acid. Behind them, the Asterisk Devastator hung in orbit like a gray dagger, her shield still raised, her weapons still hot, her TIE fighter complement reduced by 47 pilots. And below, on Tatooine's endless dunes, something new was happening. Escape pods from the Asterisk Ticonderoga had made planetfall across the Dune Sea, hundreds of them, scattering Mobile infantry survivors across a desert that made their training grounds on Klendathu look hospitable. The troopers, disoriented and wounded, secured their landing zones and began assessing casualties. They didn't realize they'd landed near moisture farms, Tusken Raider territories, and the very cantina where a farm boy named Luke Skywalker would soon meet an old hermit with a strange connection to something called the Force. And in the darkness of impact craters and cave systems, warrior bugs that had survived the orbital battle were already digging, already breeding, already preparing. The Arachnids had found a new world to infest, and neither the Empire, the Rebellion, nor the Federation understood what they'd just unleashed upon the galaxy. Grand Moff Tarkin stood before his viewscreen, studying the desert planet below with calculating eyes. The unknown vessels had retreated but not fled. They maintained position in high orbit, weapons powered down but shields raised, a defensive posture that suggested they were as confused by this encounter as the Empire. "Dispatch a garrison to the surface," Tarkin ordered. 2 full battalions of Stormtroopers. Secure any survivors from both the unknown vessels and those creatures. I want live specimens, I want their technology analyzed, and I want answers. Intelligence suggests this anomaly may be connected to rebel activity in this sector. His sensor officer cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, there's another complication. The creatures that made planetfall were detecting tunneling activity, extensive tunneling. They're spreading beneath the surface." Tarkin's expression never changed, but his voice dropped 2 degrees colder. "Then the garrison will handle that as well. This is Imperial space, and these invaders, whatever they are, will learn what that means." He didn't yet know he just ordered his troops into the opening battle of a war that would make the rebellion look like a minor provincial uprising. He didn't know the Federation survivors below were preparing for total war, the only kind they understood. And he certainly didn't know that in the depths of the tunnels, a brain bug was already processing new information. Memories extracted from a dead TIE pilot's cerebral cortex, showing it everything it needed to know about this galaxy's dominant species. The bugs were learning, the Federation was adapting, the Empire was mobilizing. And somewhere in the Force itself, the cosmic entity that bound all living things rippled with disturbance, sensing something new, something that existed outside its influence, beyond its understanding, immune to its touch. The Arachnids had no connection to the Force. No midi-chlorians flowed in their alien biology. They were a blind spot in the Force's vision, a silence where there should be noise, a darkness that even the Sith couldn't fully perceive. For the first time in millennia, the Force itself felt something approaching uncertainty. 3 factions, 1 desert world, and a war that none of them had chosen, but all of them would have to fight. The breach had been made. What followed would determine whether humanity, in all its forms, across all its philosophies, would survive to see the next dawn. If you want to see more characters and factions collide with the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a faction or universe you'd want to see in the comments below. The Federation survivors learned they were in hell within 3 hours of planetfall. Sky Marshal Dienes had been aboard the Normandy when the wormhole pulled them through, and she'd been giving orders from her cruiser's CIC ever since. Commander of the 3rd Fleet's Rapid Response Division, she'd earned her rank through 23 bug campaigns and had the scars to prove it, physical and psychological. She'd seen entire colonies glassed, watched good soldiers fed to warrior bugs while brain bugs extracted their memories, and signed off on nuclear strikes that killed millions of Arachnids and thousands of her own troops caught in the blast radius. Acceptable losses. That's what they called it in the Federal reports. Now she stood in the Normandy's Asterisk Command Center, studying holographic displays that showed a situation spiraling toward total chaos. The fleet carrier Asterisk Ticonderoga was gone, 7,000 citizens vaporized by weapons technology that made federal nukes look like firecrackers. The Gettysburg was barely holding atmosphere, her engineering crew working miracles just to keep life support online. And below, scattered across 200 square kilometers of desert, 1,500 mobile infantry troopers were digging in, while warrior bugs established tunnel networks at a pace that suggested a brain bug was coordinating the operation. "Tell me something good, Lieutenant," Dienes said to her intelligence officer, a young woman named Shaw who'd been analyzing every scrap of data from the engagement. Shaw's expression suggested there was nothing good to tell. Ma'am, spectral analysis of the enemy vessel's weapons indicates directed energy technology decades beyond our current capabilities. Their shields dispersed our railgun fire like it was hail against a bunker. And their small craft, those twin-pod fighters, use propulsion systems we can't even begin to identify. What about the planet? Desert world, nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, 0.98 standard gravity. Inhabitable but barely. We're detecting scattered settlements, primitive pre-spaceflight technology in most cases. But ma'am, Shaw hesitated, pulling up sensor data that made no sense. We're also detecting thousands of signals that match advanced technology. Cities, spaceports, industrial centers. It's like the planet has two different civilization levels existing simultaneously. Dienes frowned. Planetary development didn't work that way. You couldn't have fusion reactors and mud huts on the same world unless something had gone catastrophically wrong with the colonization effort. Are we talking post-collapse civilization? War damage? Unknown, ma'am, but there's more. We've intercepted communications, can't decrypt them yet, but the transmission methods are sophisticated. Faster-than-light communication without relay buoys. That shouldn't be possible. It shouldn't be possible. Nothing about this situation should be possible. They'd been chasing bugs through the Zejima system, preparing for a standard orbital bombardment, when the anomaly appeared and swallowed 3 ships like a hungry god. Now they were in uncharted space, facing an enemy with incomprehensible technology, while warrior bugs were already breeding in the darkness below. Get me a secure line to General Calic on the surface, Dienes ordered, and start scanning for that wormhole signature. I want to know if we can get home. The communications officer shook her head. Ma'am, the anomaly collapsed 90 minutes ago. Whatever brought us here, I don't think we're going back. Silence settled over the CIC like a funeral shroud. Stranded, cut off from federal space, from reinforcements, from everything they'd known. The Mobile Infantry had a saying for situations like this: dig in and die slow, or die fast standing up. Neither option appealed to Sky Marshal Dienes. Then we establish a foothold, she said, her voice carrying the steel that had earned her the rank. We secure the surface, eliminate the bug infestation, and make contact with whoever controls that massive warship. If we can't get home, we make this place ours. That's what humanity does. We adapt, we survive, we conquer. It was the Federation way. It was the only way she knew. What she didn't know was that the massive warship's commander had already reached the same conclusion about Asterisk them. Grand Moff Tarkin reviewed the initial reports from the surface with growing interest. The Imperial garrison had deployed to the crash sites in the Dune Sea, and what they'd found defied preliminary assessments. The survivors from the unknown vessels were human, unquestionably, undeniably human, though their equipment, language, and military doctrine suggested an origin far outside Imperial space. They wore powered armor that gave each soldier the combat capability of a Stormtrooper squad, carried weapons that fired solid projectiles at hypersonic velocities, and most disturbingly, fought with a coordinated brutality that reminded Tarkin of the Clone Wars at its worst. Commander Voss, leading the 501st Legion's advance element, had attempted peaceful contact. The result had been a firefight that left 12 stormtroopers dead, and the unknown soldiers retreating into defensive positions that suggested extensive combat engineering training. They'd mined the approach routes, established interlocking fields of fire, and when Imperial ATSDs moved to flank their positions, some of the soldiers had fired shoulder-mounted missiles that destroyed both walkers with contemptuous efficiency. But that wasn't the worst part. The creatures, Voss reported via encrypted holonet transmission, his image flickering with interference from the desert's mineral deposits. They're not native to this world. They arrived with the unknown vessels, but they're hostile to both Imperial forces and the strangers. We've lost 37 troopers to ambush attacks. The creatures tunnel beneath the sand and strike from below. Blaster fire kills them, but they keep coming. It's like fighting an army that doesn't understand fear. Tarkin studied the tactical map overlaying his desk. Red markers indicated Imperial positions. Blue markers showed the strangers' defensive perimeter. And spreading across the Dune Sea like a cancer, yellow markers represented confirmed creature sightings. The infestation was growing exponentially. "Commander, cease offensive operations against the unknown humans," Tarkin ordered. "Instead, establish a communication channel. Use visual signals if necessary, mathematics, physics, anything universal. I want to know who they are and where they came from." "Sir, they're still firing on our approach teams." "Then stop approaching them," Tarkin snapped. "The enemy of our enemy may prove useful. But Commander, if those creatures reach the moisture farms or Mos Eisley, you are authorized to use orbital bombardment. Contain the infestation at all costs." He cut the transmission and turned to his intelligence officer, a calculating woman named Yularen who'd served with him since the Clone Wars. "What's your assessment, Admiral?" Yularen pulled up the sensor data from the engagement, her expression troubled. "Their technology is crude but effective. Kinetic weapons, nuclear armaments, and fleet doctrine based on overwhelming force rather than precision strikes. But there's something else, Governor. Our force-sensitive assets report something unusual about the creatures." "Explain." "They can't sense them. The creatures exist, they're clearly alive, but they don't register in the Force. It's as if they're not truly living in the way the Force defines life. Our Inquisitors describe it as looking at a blind spot. You know something's there because of what it obscures, but you can't perceive it directly." Tarkin's interest sharpened. "And the humans, the soldiers from the unknown vessels?" "Completely mundane. No force sensitivity detected among any of them. They fight with technology and training alone." Yularen paused, considering her next words carefully. "Governor, I believe we're dealing with a human civilization that developed entirely outside the influence of the Force. That shouldn't be possible, but the evidence is undeniable." It was a fascinating hypothesis. The Force pervaded all things in the galaxy, or so the Jedi had claimed before their order's extinction. But what if there were humans from beyond the galaxy itself, from places where the Force held no sway? What could the Empire learn from such a civilization? What weapons, what technologies, what doctrines might they possess? "Continue analysis," Tarkin ordered, "and prepare a delegation. If these strangers want war, we'll give them annihilation. But if they can be reasoned with, they may prove valuable allies against the rebellion." He didn't add the obvious corollary, that any civilization capable of traveling between galaxies represented either an immense opportunity or an existential threat. The Emperor would want to know about this personally, which meant Tarkin needed answers before Lord Vader arrived to investigate. The Dark Lord had a tendency to simplify complex situations through the application of overwhelming force-powered violence. Sometimes that was useful. Sometimes it destroyed valuable intelligence assets. Tarkin intended to have answers ready before the question became irrelevant. In the medical bay of the Normandy Asterisk, Captain Rachel Owen tried not to scream as the ship's doctor set her broken arm. She'd been leading a squad of mobile infantry when her drop pod malfunctioned during atmospheric entry, slamming into a dune at terminal velocity. Powered armor had saved her life, but not her radius and ulna. "Hold still," Dr. Marcos muttered, his hands steady despite the ship's ongoing damage control operations. "I've set worse in field hospitals on Klendathu." Owen believed him. Every federal doctor had trauma experience that would make civilian physicians faint. When your patient base included people who'd been partially eaten by bugs, you learned to work fast and complain later. "Doc, tell me straight," she said through gritted teeth. Where the hell are we? Marcos finished applying the synthetic cast and sat back, his face haggard. Best guess. Different galaxy entirely. The stellar cartography doesn't match any federal records. The constellations are wrong, the star density is different, and that wormhole we came through. It broke every known law of physics. So we're stuck. We're stuck, but Captain, that's not the worst part. He pulled up a holographic display showing the tactical engagement. Those weapons that destroyed the asterisk Ticonderoga, they weren't kinetic. They weren't nuclear. They were pure energy, coherent plasma or something close to it. We're talking technology that makes our fleet look like we're fighting with sharp sticks. Owen felt cold despite the medical bay's temperature regulation. She'd seen the engagement footage, watched her ship die in seconds, watched weapons she couldn't begin to understand tear through armor that was supposed to withstand nuclear detonations. If these people, whoever they were, decided the Federation was an enemy, there would be no acceptable losses. There would only be extinction. What about the bugs? She asked. That's the asterisk, really asterisk bad news. General Kalik reports they're tunneling faster than our seismic sensors can track. Brain-bug coordination confirmed. If we don't contain them soon, they'll spread across this entire planet. And if they adapt to whatever's down there, Marcos trailed off, but Owen understood the implication. Arachnids were the perfect invasive species. They ate everything organic, bred exponentially, and adapted to any environment given time. On Klendathu, the bug homeworld, they'd evolved in a high-gravity, low-oxygen environment. On the farming colonies, they'd adapted to human agricultural ecosystems within weeks. Here, in a desert world with unknown indigenous life, they'd become whatever the environment required. I need to get back to my squad, Owen said, standing despite the pain medication making her dizzy. Captain, you're in no condition. Doc, we're stranded in hostile space with bugs digging in and some kind of super-advanced civilization shooting at us. Nobody's in condition for this, but we're mobile infantry. We don't get to quit just because the universe is trying to kill us. She left the medical bay before he could argue, heading for the armory to requisition new gear. Her squad, what was left of it, would be planetside by now, digging in with General Kalik's main force. They'd need every rifle they could get. Behind her, Dr. Marcos watched her go and wondered how long the Federation's famous esprit de corps would last once the troopers realized they might never see home again. Morale was a fragile thing, even in the mobile infantry, especially in the mobile infantry. He turned back to his patients, burns, lacerations, vacuum exposure, and tried not to think about the fact that this was only the beginning. General Anton Kalik had been fighting bugs for 15 years, and he'd learned one critical lesson: never underestimate their intelligence. The warrior bugs were savage and seemingly mindless, but brain bugs coordinated them with tactical sophistication that would make federal officers envious. Hopper bugs provided aerial reconnaissance. Tanker bugs functioned as living artillery. And somewhere in the tunnel networks beneath his defensive perimeter, a brain bug was processing everything it had learned from the dead crew of the asterisk Ticonderoga asterisk. Status report, Kalik ordered. His command post a prefab bunker that mobile infantry engineers had assembled in under an hour. The Federation military excelled at rapid fortification, a skill born from centuries of fighting on hostile worlds. Lieutenant Hendricks, his intelligence officer, pulled up the tactical display. Perimeter secure, sir. We've got 1,500 effectives spread across a 3-click radius. Automated gun platforms established at all cardinal points. Seismic sensors detecting tunnel activity at depths ranging from 5 to 50 meters. Estimate warrior bug population at least 2,000 and growing. Kalik's jaw tightened. 2,000 bugs, with a brain bug coordinating them. That was enough to overrun his position if they struck all at once. Where's the closest civilian population? Settlement called Mos Eisley, 80 clicks northeast. Population roughly 2,000 sentients. And General, that's another thing, we're reading non-human life signs. Multiple species. Baseline scans suggest at least 15 different sapient species in that one settlement alone. A multi-species civilization. That was rare. The Federation had encountered a few alien species in its expansion, mostly primitive, occasionally hostile, never truly sapient by Federal standards. But 15 different species coexisting in one settlement suggested a galactic civilization that made the Federation look like provincial colonists. "What about those soldiers who engaged us?" Kalik asked. "The ones in the white armor." "They've pulled back to observation positions. No further hostile action, but they're definitely watching us. Their armor doesn't match any Federal patterns and their weapons. Sir, they're using directed energy small arms. Portable plasma weapons. That's at least 50 years beyond our current infantry tech." Kalik had seen the footage, watched Federation troopers in powered armor get cut down by weapons that burned through ablative plating like it wasn't there. His people were good, the best humanity could produce, but they were fighting with kinetic weapons against an enemy with energy technology and bugs that literally wanted to eat them all. "Open a comm channel," he ordered. "Broad spectrum, every frequency we've got, audio and visual." "Sir, we don't know their language." "Then we'll use something universal. Math, physics, intent." Kalik keyed the transmission himself, broadcasting on every channel simultaneously. "Unknown forces, this is General Anton Kalik of the Terran Federation Mobile Infantry. We are not your enemy. Repeat, we are not your enemy. The organisms you encountered, the creatures that attacked both our forces, are called Arachnids. They are hostile to all human life. We request a ceasefire to address this mutual threat. If you can understand this message, respond on any frequency. We are willing to negotiate." Static answered him. For long minutes, nothing but white noise and the hiss of atmospheric interference. Kalik was about to repeat the transmission when the speakers crackled to life. The voice was cold, clipped, and utterly devoid of compassion. It spoke in a language Kalik didn't recognize, but the computer's translation algorithms worked frantically to interpret tone, context, and mathematical patterns in the audio stream. After 10 seconds, text appeared on his screen. "Translation in progress. Estimated accuracy, 67%. Unknown speaker. You have violated Imperial space. Your vessels are in breach of multiple security protocols. Surrender immediately and submit to Imperial authority or be destroyed. You have 1 standard hour to respond." Kalik felt his blood run cold. Imperial space. Imperial authority. The translation wasn't perfect, but the message was crystal clear. They'd stumbled into someone else's territory, and that someone had enough firepower to back up their demands. "Sir," Hendrick's voice was tight with tension. Kalik stared at the message, then at the tactical display showing warrior bugs multiplying beneath the sand, then at the distant markers representing soldiers in white armor who'd already proven they could kill mobile infantry with contemptuous ease. He thought about Sky Marshal Dienes' orders: establish a foothold, adapt, survive, conquer, asterisk. He thought about the Federation's doctrine of acceptable losses and total war. He thought about the fact that they were stranded in hostile space with no reinforcements, no extraction, and no good options. "Send a response," he said finally. "Tell them we're willing to negotiate. Tell them we have information about the creatures that might save their planet. And tell them," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "tell them we come in peace, but we will defend ourselves if attacked. We're soldiers, not invaders. There's a difference." It was a gamble, a desperate, probably futile gamble. But General Anton Kalik hadn't survived 15 years of bug campaigns by refusing to take risks. The transmission went out, and somewhere in orbit, Grand Moff Tarkin read it with calculating interest. 2 human civilizations, separated by gulfs that might be unbridgeable, attempting first contact while warrior bugs bred in the darkness below. Neither side knew it yet, but they'd both just made the same critical mistake. They'd assumed the bugs were the primary threat. They weren't. The primary threat had just noticed them both. In the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine felt a disturbance in the Force. It was subtle, a ripple rather than a wave, but unmistakable in its wrongness. Something had entered his domain that didn't belong, something that existed outside the natural order he'd spent decades manipulating. He reached out with senses that transcended physical reality, probing the disturbance with the dark side's infinite hunger, and found nothing. Not emptiness, but absence asterisk, as if something had carved a hole in the Force itself. A space where life should exist but didn't, where the cosmic energy that bound all things simply stopped. Interesting, Palpatine murmured to the empty throne room. Most interesting indeed. He activated the holoprojector, and the image of Grand Moff Tarkin appeared before him, kneeling in holographic miniature. "My lord," Tarkin began, "I have a situation that requires your attention." "I am aware, Governor." Palpatine's voice carried the weight of ancient malice. "Unknown vessels, unknown forces, and creatures that exist outside the Force's touch. You will contain them, study them, and report your findings directly to me. Lord Vader will join you within the standard day. Until then, consider this your highest priority." "As you command, my lord. But if I may ask, what asterisk are these creatures?" Palpatine smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "A blind spot, Governor, a flaw in creation itself, or perhaps," his smile widened, "perhaps an opportunity. The Force has long been the galaxy's greatest power, but what use is power that cannot touch all things? What use is dominion if exceptions exist?" He cut the transmission, leaving Tarkin to interpret the Emperor's words as he would. Then Palpatine settled deeper into his throne and contemplated the possibilities. A civilization that existed without the Force, creatures that were invisible to his sight, and somewhere in the chaos, an opportunity to expand his understanding of the dark side beyond the limitations the Sith had accepted for millennia. The rule of two demanded that the apprentice eventually surpass the master. But what if there were powers beyond the Force entirely? What if the dark side was merely one tool among many? Emperor Palpatine had not conquered the galaxy by limiting his ambitions. He would not start now. Far away on a desert world where twin suns baked endless dunes, three forces converged: the Empire's might, the Federation's desperation, and the Arachnids' hunger. And in the shadows between them, the Rebel Alliance watched and waited, wondering if these newcomers represented salvation or damnation. The answer, as always, would be written in blood. The first joint operation between Imperial forces and the Terran Federation began not with diplomacy or mutual respect, but with screaming. Corporal Dizzy Flores of the Mobile Infantry had been on perimeter watch when the ground beneath her exploded. One moment she was scanning the darkness beyond the defensive perimeter, her helmet's low-light optics turning the Tatooine night into shades of green and gray. The next, a warrior bug the size of a small transport burst from the sand like a breaching sea creature, mandibles snapping for her torso. Training saved her life. She dove left, her powered armor servos amplifying the movement into a superhuman leap that carried her 3 meters through the air. The bug's mandibles closed on empty space where she'd been standing. Flores hit the ground rolling, brought up her Morita rifle, and emptied a 30-round magazine into the creature's head at point-blank range. Hypersonic tungsten penetrators punched through chitin armor, shredding the bug's neural cluster into pulp. It died thrashing, its death spasms tearing apart the automated gun platform she'd been guarding. Then the screaming started, not from Flores, she was too busy reloading, but from the ground itself. The seismic sensors had been wrong. The brain bug hadn't been coordinating 2,000 warriors. It had been coordinating asterisk 20,000 asterisk, and it had spent the last 6 hours moving them into position for a simultaneous assault across the entire Federation perimeter. The Dune Sea erupted. Hundreds of tunnels disgorged warrior bugs in a living wave of chitin and hunger. They came from below, from the flanks, from directions the mobile infantry hadn't fortified, because the seismic data said they were clear. Brain bug deception. The Federation had encountered it before on Klendathu and P Station, but never executed with this level of sophistication. General Kallic's command bunker became a storm of coordinated chaos. All units, weapons free, activate perimeter mines, call in fire support from the Normandy asterisk. His voice boomed through the tactical network as red icons flooded the holographic display. Too many, far too many. Mobile infantry troopers fought like cornered tigers. Morita rifles barked in staccato bursts, cutting down bugs at ranges where their mandibles couldn't reach. Flamers turned the night into hell, immolating warrior bugs by the dozens. Rocket launchers fired mini-nukes into the largest concentrations, and for a few glorious seconds, it looked like the Federation line might hold. Then the hopper bugs arrived. They came from above, having launched themselves from distant dunes to arc over the defensive perimeter in ballistic trajectories that brought them down inside the Federation's lines. Smaller than warriors but faster, and equipped with proboscis stingers that punched through powered armor like wet tissue, the hoppers turned the organized defense into desperate close-quarters butchery. Corporal Flores found herself back-to-back with Private Chen, both of them firing in controlled bursts as bugs swarmed their position. "Where's our goddamn air support?" Chen screamed, his voice cracking with adrenaline and terror. Flores had no answer. The Normandy was trying. Tactical nuclear missiles were already screaming down from orbit, detonating in flowers of atomic fire that vaporized everything within a 100-meter radius. But the bugs kept coming, flowing around the blast zones like water around stones, and the Federation couldn't nuke their own positions without killing their own troops. Acceptable losses, that's what Command would call it later, a necessary sacrifice in the mathematics of survival. Flores was so focused on the bugs in front of her that she almost didn't notice the new contacts approaching from the northeast. Almost. Contacts, multiple signatures, heavy armor closing fast. The automated defense systems swiveled toward the newcomers, target locks engaging. Hold fire, General Kallic's voice cut through the chaos. Those are Imperial forces. The ATSTs came first, their massive legs eating distance with mechanical precision. The walkers had been repositioned during the ceasefire negotiations, and now they opened fire with laser cannons that turned warrior bugs into smoking craters. Behind them came stormtrooper squads in speeder bikes and personnel transports, their white armor ghostly in the darkness, their E-11 blaster rifles adding brilliant red bolts to the Morita's kinetic thunder. Commander Voss had made a command decision. Grand Moff Tarkin had ordered observation and containment, but Voss had been a soldier before he'd been a politician, and he recognized the sound of a defensive line collapsing. If the unknown humans fell, the creatures would spread. If they spread, they'd reach Imperial settlements. If they reached settlements, Tarkin would order orbital bombardment that would kill thousands of Imperial citizens along with the bugs. Sometimes the only way to follow orders was to disobey them. All units engage the hostile organisms, Voss commanded. Prioritize the larger specimens, warriors and tankers. Let the newcomers handle their own perimeter. The combined force of Imperial technology and Federation desperation hit the Arachnid assault like a hammer. ATST laser cannons could kill a warrior bug with a single shot, something that took mobile infantry troopers entire magazines to accomplish. Stormtrooper blasters, while less powerful than turbolasers, fired faster than Morita rifles and never needed reloading, just fresh power packs. But the bugs adapted. They always adapted. Warrior bugs began targeting the ATSD's legs, their mandibles strong enough to shear through the walker's support struts. When the walkers fell, tanker bugs, massive organisms that could project streams of corrosive acid, moved in to melt the crew compartments and the screaming pilots inside. Hopper bugs learned to avoid the open ground where blaster fire was thickest, instead using the confusion to strike from unexpected angles. And through it all, somewhere in the darkness, a brain bug watched and learned. Corporal Flores found herself fighting alongside a stormtrooper, whose designation she didn't know, and whose face she couldn't see behind the white helmet. They'd ended up in the same defensive crater when a warrior bug had nearly torn them both apart, and now they covered each other's flanks with the unspoken understanding of soldiers who knew that ideological differences meant nothing when things were trying to eat you. "Your weapon," the stormtrooper shouted, his voice filtered through his helmet speakers. "How many shots?" Flores checked her ammunition counter. 40 rounds, yours. Power pack at 60%. What are these things? Arachnids, bugs from our space. There, she fired a burst that took down a hopper bug mid-leap. They're goddamn nightmares. The stormtrooper, designation TK-421, though Flores would never learn his name, fired his E-11 in precise 3-round bursts that showed training and discipline. "We have protocols for hostile xenoforms. Contain, catalog, and eliminate. But I've never seen anything that fights like this." "Welcome to the Mobile Infantry experience." Flores emptied her magazine into a charging warrior, reloaded with practice speed, and kept firing. "Where we're from, this is a Tuesday." They held their crater for 7 minutes. 7 minutes of sustained combat that burned through ammunition, power packs, and the kind of adrenaline that would leave them shaking for hours afterward. When the warrior bugs finally pulled back, not retreating, but repositioning in a way that suggested tactical thinking, both soldiers collapsed against the crater wall, gasping for air. TK-421 removed his helmet, revealing a young face covered in sweat and dust. He looked barely 20 standard years old. "Your people fight things like this regularly." Flores laughed, and it was not a happy sound. "Regularly? Try constantly. We've been at war with the bugs for decades. Entire colonies wiped out. Millions of casualties. It's why we have the Mobile Infantry. Someone's got to stand between humanity and extinction." The stormtrooper stared at her, something like respect dawning in his eyes. "We're fighting a rebellion. Insurgents, terrorists, political dissidents. Dangerous, but nothing like this. These creatures don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They just keep coming." "Now you're getting it." Flores pulled a ration bar from her armor's utility pouch, bit off half, and offered the rest to TK-421. He took it after a moment's hesitation, and they ate in silence while the sounds of distant combat echoed across the Dune Sea. "I'm Dizzy," Flores said finally. "Corporal Dizzy Flores, 2nd Mobile Infantry Division." TK-421, Stormtrooper Corps 501st Legion. He paused, then added quietly, "My name's Jens. Before I enlisted anyway. Now I'm just a designation." Flores understood that. The Federation had its own ways of turning citizens into soldiers, stripping away individuality in favor of unit cohesion. But at least Mobile Infantry troopers kept their names. Small mercy, but a mercy nonetheless. "Well, Jens, who's TK-421, looks like we're allies now, whether our commanders like it or not." Above them, the twin suns of Tatooine began their rise over the horizon, painting the carnage in shades of orange and gold. Warrior bug corpses littered the battlefield in heaps of cooling chitin. ATSD wrecks smoldered where tanker bugs had melted them, and scattered among the alien dead were the bodies of soldiers from 2 human civilizations who died fighting something neither truly understood. General Calix surveyed the aftermath from his command bunker and tried not to calculate the acceptable losses. 63 Mobile Infantry troopers dead, another 100 wounded, some critically. 3 automated gun platforms destroyed, ammunition expenditure at 70% of reserves. But they'd held. Against 20,000 bugs they'd held. Commander Voss stood beside him, his white armor scorched and dented from personal combat. The Imperial officer had fought on the front lines alongside his troops, something that surprised Galactic, who'd assumed the white armor soldiers were garrison troops led by aristocratic officers who commanded from safety. "Your people fight well," Voss said, his tone grudging but genuine. "I've seen clone troopers with less discipline under fire." Galactic nodded slowly. "Your weapons are impressive. Energy-based small arms with that kind of stopping power. We've theorized about it but never made it practical. The power requirements alone are solved by Tibanna gas refinement and hypermatter reactions." Voss pulled off his helmet, revealing a face scarred by combat and hardened by Imperial service. "General, we need to establish formal protocols. My orders were to observe and contain. I exceeded those orders to prevent a massacre. Grand Moff Tarkin will want explanations." "Grand Moff," Galactic filed the title away for later analysis. "Is he your commanding officer?" "He commands the Outer Rim territories, which includes this system." Voss gestured at the battlefield. "And now he's going to want to know why I committed Imperial forces to defend an unknown military presence instead of letting the creatures eliminate you as a potential threat." Galactic appreciated the honesty. Military men spoke the same language across civilizations, apparently. "What do you need from me?" "Information. Who you are, where you're from, and why those creatures came with you. Tarkin values intelligence above all else. Give him answers, and he might see you as assets rather than problems." "And if we refuse?" Voss's expression hardened. "Then that Star Destroyer in orbit will turn this entire region into glass. I've seen Tarkin order base Delta Zero operations, total planetary sterilization. He'll do it without hesitation if he perceives sufficient threat." Base Delta Zero. Galactic didn't know the term, but the context was clear enough. Orbital bombardment, planetary genocide. The Federation had its own doctrines for that, acceptable losses taken to the logical extreme. "We'll cooperate," Galactic said. "But Commander, understand this. My people don't surrender. We don't submit to foreign authority. We're citizens of the Terran Federation, and we earn that citizenship through service and sacrifice. If your Grand Moff wants alliance, we'll negotiate as equals. If he wants subjugation, he'll find out why the bugs haven't beaten us in 30 years of total war." For a long moment, Voss studied the Federation general. Then slowly he smiled. "I think Tarkin is going to find you very interesting, possibly even useful. Just remember, General, the Empire controls hundreds of systems, commands fleets that could blot out stars, and serves an emperor whose power you cannot comprehend. Your mobile infantry is impressive, but you're fighting with primitive weapons in a galaxy that's moved beyond kinetic warfare. Primitive weapons that just help save your troops from being overrun." Galactic's voice was mild, but his eyes were steel. "Commander, we may be stranded in your galaxy, but we're not helpless. And we're not stupid. We know we're outgunned. But we also know how to survive against overwhelming odds. It's what we do." The two officers stood in silence, each measuring the other, each recognizing a kindred spirit shaped by warfare and tempered by loss. They would never be friends. Their civilizations were too different, their philosophies too divergent. But they were soldiers, and that meant something. "I'll arrange a meeting with Tarkin," Voss said finally. "Bring your senior officers. Leave your weapons behind. It's protocol for diplomatic contact. And General, don't mention your nuclear capabilities unless specifically asked. The Empire has strong opinions about unauthorized military forces possessing strategic weapons." Galactic understood. Every civilization had weapons they preferred others didn't possess. For the Federation, it was the bugs' plasma technology. For this empire, apparently, it was nukes. "Agreed when?" 6 hours. That gives us time to secure the perimeter and establish a cordon around the remaining creature tunnels. Your engineers, do they have expertise in underground warfare? We've cleared bug tunnels on 15 worlds. Your people provide the firepower, mine provide the expertise, and maybe we can exterminate these things before they spread. Voss extended his hand in the ancient human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Calix shook it. The grip was firm, the understanding mutual. Two civilizations, meeting across impossible distances, finding common ground in the oldest human tradition, shared enemies and temporary alliances. 60 kilometers away, in the ruins of a moisture farm that warrior bugs had overrun during their initial spread, something watched the sunrise with eyes that had never evolved to appreciate beauty. The brain bug was small compared to the warriors, barely 2 meters long, but its intelligence was vast. Not human intelligence, not individual consciousness as humans understood it, but something else entirely. A hive mind that processed information from thousands of warrior bugs simultaneously, coordinating their actions with the efficiency of a distributed computer network. It had learned much in the past 12 hours. Learned that this world contained two different human civilizations with different technologies and different philosophies. Learned that one civilization used energy weapons while the other relied on kinetic force. Learned that both groups could cooperate when sufficiently threatened, but that the cooperation was fragile, temporary, born of desperation rather than trust. Most importantly, it had learned from the dead TIE fighter pilot, whose brain it had consumed 6 hours earlier. The memories were fragmentary, dying thoughts and combat protocols mixed with personal recollections, but they painted a picture of a galaxy vast beyond comprehension. Thousands of inhabited worlds, trillions of sentient beings, all of them potential biomass for the hive, all of them food. The brain bug sent out a pheromone command and the remaining warrior bugs began a new tunnel network. Deeper this time, more subtle. They would not assault the human defensive positions again, not yet. Instead, they would spread, infiltrate, reproduce, adapt. The humans believed they'd won a victory. Let them believe it. The Arachnids had lost individual battles before. They'd lost entire colonies, entire fleets, entire generations of warriors. But the hive always survived, always adapted, always found a way. This galaxy would learn what the Terran Federation had learned over 30 years of total war. You didn't defeat the bugs through military superiority. You defeated them through genocide so complete that not a single egg remained. And neither the Empire nor the Federation had shown they were willing to go that far. Not yet. The brain bug burrowed deeper into the sand, its workers already hollowing out nursery chambers where thousands of new warriors would gestate. It would take time, weeks, perhaps months, but time was something the hive understood. Time was on their side. The humans fought among themselves, negotiated territorial boundaries, worried about politics and power. The hive simply bred, spread, and consumed. By the time either human civilization realized the true scope of the infestation, it would be far too late. Aboard the Devastator Asterisk, Grand Moff Tarkin reviewed Commander Voss's report with clinical detachment. The engagement had been brutal but informative. The unknown humans, this Terran Federation, possessed military capabilities that were simultaneously impressive and primitive. Their soldiers fought with discipline and courage comparable to clone troopers, but their weapons technology lagged decades behind Imperial standard. More interesting were the creatures, the Arachnids, as the Federation called them. Initial analysis suggested they were a hive-mind species with surprising tactical sophistication. Not sapient in the traditional sense, no language, no culture, no civilization, but intelligent in the way of colony organisms like Genosian drones, but far more dangerous. And most disturbing of all, they were invisible to the Force. Tarkin pulled up the report from the Inquisitor, who'd observed the battle from orbit. The Force-sensitive agent had described the Arachnids as holes in the living force, voids where life should exist but doesn't register. He'd compared it to looking at a shadow. You knew something was there because of what it obscured, but you couldn't perceive it directly. That made them potentially more dangerous than any rebel cell. The Force had been the Jedi's great advantage, and now it was the Empire's. Force-sensitive Inquisitors could hunt Jedi survivors by feeling their presence in the Force. Vader could sense deception, fear, and hostile intent. But against an enemy the Force couldn't touch. Those advantages evaporated. "Admiral Yularen," Tarkin said without looking up from his datapad. "Analysis." The intelligence officer stepped forward, her expression troubled. "Sir, I believe we're witnessing a first contact scenario with a civilization from outside our galaxy. The Federation's technology suggests parallel human development, but their cultural markers don't match any known human colony. Their language shares no roots with basic, Hutties, or any documented human dialect, and their military doctrine is brutally efficient," Tarkin finished. "They fight total war with acceptable casualties that would make even the Empire pause. Nuclear weapons deployed without hesitation. Soldiers who view death as a statistical inevitability rather than a tragedy. Tell me, Admiral, what do you think motivates such a civilization?" Yularen considered carefully. "Desperation, sir. They fight like a species that's facing extinction. Every engagement is existential. Every soldier is expendable. It's the kind of military culture that only develops under sustained, total threat." "Precisely." Tarkin set down the datapad and looked out at the stars, which suggests the Arachnids are a greater threat than initial assessment indicated. If they've fought this Federation for decades without either side achieving decisive victory, we're dealing with an enemy that can adapt, survive, and persist despite facing nuclear bombardment and mass casualties. That makes them a threat to the Empire itself. "Sir, you're recommending extermination." "I'm recommending containment, followed by study, followed by elimination. But first, we need to understand what we're facing." Tarkin turned back to his command console. "Arrange the meeting with General Galactic. I want to know everything about these Arachnids, their biology, their tactics, their weaknesses. And I want to know what the Federation has learned over 30 years of warfare. And if they refuse to cooperate." Tarkin's smile was cold. "Then we'll learn from their corpses instead. The Empire does not tolerate threats to galactic stability, whether those threats come from rebel terrorists or interdimensional invaders is immaterial." He dismissed Yularen and stood alone on the bridge, watching Tatooine's desert surface rotate slowly beneath his ship. Somewhere down there, bugs were breeding in the darkness. Somewhere up here, the Federation fleet maintained their defensive posture, unsure whether they'd found allies or enemies. And somewhere in the galaxy, the Rebel Alliance was undoubtedly planning to exploit this chaos for their own seditious purposes. Too many variables, too many unknowns. Tarkin built his career on eliminating variables through calculated ruthlessness. He would do so again. The meeting with General Galactic would be illuminating, and depending on what the Federation General revealed, Tarkin would make a decision that would affect the entire galaxy. Alliance, subjugation, or annihilation. The choice, as always, would be based purely on which option best served the Empire. The conference took place in a prefabricated structure that neither side trusted, erected in neutral ground between the Imperial cordon and Federation defensive positions. The building itself was Imperial, assembled by engineering crews in under 2 hours, complete with climate control, holographic projectors, and sensor-blocking walls that prevented electronic eavesdropping. General Galactic had insisted his own technical team sweep it for surveillance devices, and they'd found 17, all of which the Imperials claimed were standard security protocols. Sky Marshal Dienes stood at the viewport, watching the twin suns climb higher over the Dune Sea and tried to process what she'd learned in the past 12 hours. The Terran Federation, humanity's greatest achievement, a civilization spanning dozens of worlds and billions of citizens, was apparently a provincial footnote in a galaxy so vast it made federal territory look like a township. The Empire claimed to control thousands of star systems, thousands asterisk, with a population in the trillions and military assets that dwarfed the entire federal fleet. Either they were lying, or the Federation had stumbled into something beyond their worst strategic nightmares. "They're here," General Calix said quietly, and Dienes turned from the viewport. The Imperial delegation entered with the kind of presence that made clear they expected deference. Grand Moff Tarkin came first, tall, gaunt, dressed in a gray uniform that spoke of rank and authority. Behind him walked Commander Voss and two others, a woman in a naval uniform who studied everything with calculating eyes, and something that made Dienes' skin crawl instinctively. The figure was tall, clad entirely in black armor that seemed to absorb light. A respirator mask covered its face, breathing with a mechanical rhythm that sounded like death itself. When it moved, there was a sense of wrongness, as if reality bent slightly around it in ways that human perception couldn't quite process. "I am Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin, Governor of the Outer Rim Territories," the gaunt man began without preamble. "This is Admiral Yularen, Commander Voss, and Lord Vader." He gestured to each in turn, his tone suggesting he expected no introduction in return. Dienes held his gaze. "Sky Marshal Rachel Dienes, Commander of the Third Fleet. General Anton Kalik, commanding ground forces. We represent the Terran Federation and come as equals to this negotiation." Tarkin's expression never changed, but something flickered in his eyes, amusement perhaps, or contempt. "Equals? How? Optimistic. Tell me, Sky Marshal, how many star systems does your Federation control?" 43 colonized worlds, another 112 mining operations and outposts, Dienes replied evenly. "We're a growing civilization, recovering from decades of total war." 43. Tarkin let the number hang in the air like an indictment. "The Empire controls over 1 million inhabited systems. Our military comprises millions of vessels and trillions of personnel. Your entire civilization could fit comfortably within a single sector of Imperial space." He paused, letting that sink in. "Now, shall we discuss the terms of your surrender?" Calix's hand moved toward his sidearm before he caught himself. The black-armored figure, Lord Vader, shifted slightly, and suddenly every federal officer in the room felt pressure against their chests, as if the air itself had become hostile. "General," Vader's voice was deep, mechanically filtered, and carried weight beyond mere sound. "I would advise restraint. Your weapons are primitive, your tactical position untenable, and your very presence here exists at Imperial sufferance. Hostility would be inadvisable." Dienes stepped between Kalik and the Imperial delegation, her voice cutting through the tension. "With respect, Governor Tarkin, we didn't come to surrender. We came to propose an alliance against a mutual threat. The Arachnids don't care about your empire or our Federation. They care about biomass, food, reproduction. If we don't contain them now, they'll spread across this planet, then to others, then throughout your entire galaxy. We've seen it happen. We've lost entire colonies. This isn't politics, it's survival." Tarkin considered her words with the expression of a man evaluating a business proposition. "You speak of these creatures as if they're an existential threat, yet our forces defeated them with minimal casualties. Commander Voss, what were our losses during the engagement?" 47 personnel, sir. 12 Stormtroopers, 35 TIE fighter pilots. Acceptable losses for a containment operation. "Acceptable losses," Dienes repeated, her voice hardening. "You lost 47 people and call it acceptable. We lost 63. Do you know how many we've lost fighting the bugs over 30 years? 300,000 mobile infantry troopers. 15 million civilians on colonies they overran before we could evacuate. And we're *winning* the war." barely. Because we learned to fight them with nuclear weapons, orbital bombardment, and tactics that make your containment operation look like a parade drill. Admiral Yularen spoke for the first time, her voice analytical. 300,000 casualties over 3 decades. That's sustainable for total war, lower than Clone War's attrition rates. How large is your military? Active duty, 2 million mobile infantry, another 5 million in the federal fleet. Reserves and militia bring it to 20 million. The Imperial officers exchanged glances. Tarkin's expression remained neutral, but Yularen looked genuinely surprised. You field a military force of 20 million to fight these Arachnids, yet they persist. Sky Marshal, that suggests either remarkable enemy resilience or significant tactical inadequacy on your part. Kalik couldn't stay silent. It suggests you don't understand what you're facing. The bugs breed exponentially. One brain bug can coordinate 1 million warriors. They adapt to every weapon we deploy, every tactic we use. We've nuked their homeworld, Klendathu, 3 times. 3 separate planetary bombardments that would have sterilized any other species. They rebuilt, recolonized, came back stronger. For the first time, Vader spoke again. Homeworld, implying they're native to your dimension, not this one. That's correct. Dienes pulled out a data tablet, primitive by Imperial standards but functional. We were pursuing a bug fleet through federal space when a spatial anomaly appeared. Some kind of wormhole or dimensional rift. It pulled 3 of our ships through, along with the bugs we were chasing. Now we're here, they're here, and unless we cooperate, they'll infest your galaxy the same way they've plagued ours. Tarkin gestured, and one of the holographic projectors activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of Tatooine. Red markers indicated confirmed Arachnid tunnel networks, already spreading like cancer through the Dune Sea. Our sensors detect extensive underground activity. Your assessment of their current population? At least 50,000 warriors, probably more, Kalik said. Brain bug coordination confirmed. They're breeding faster than we can kill them, which means every hour we spend negotiating is another hour they get stronger. Then perhaps, Tarkin said coldly, the solution is orbital bombardment. Sterilize the region before the infestation spreads. A Star Destroyer's turbolasers can render the Dune Sea uninhabitable within hours. And kill how many civilians in the process? Dienes' voice was sharp. We detected settlements, moisture farms. That town, Mos Eisley. You'd murder your own citizens to solve a problem that can be contained through ground operations. Acceptable losses, Sky Marshal. You should understand the concept. You've employed it yourself. Nuclear weapons on your own colonies. Entire populations sacrificed to deny the enemy resources. Tarkin's smile was razor-thin. We're not so different. You and I, we both understand that sentiment and morality are luxuries in warfare. The difference is that I command resources sufficient to make any sacrifice worthwhile. The room fell silent. Outside, the wind howled across the Dune Sea, carrying sand that would bury this moment regardless of what decisions were made within these walls. Vader broke the silence. There is another consideration. These creatures exist outside the Force. I cannot sense them, cannot influence them, cannot predict their movements through precognition. His respirator hissed rhythmically. That makes them problematic. The Emperor will want specimens, research subjects, and he will want to know how an entire species can exist beyond the Force's touch. The Force, Kalik frowned. What's that? The Imperial officers stared at him. Even Tarkin's calculated composure slipped for a fraction of a second. Vader actually turned fully toward the Federation general, his masked face somehow conveying incredulity despite showing no features. You don't know the Force, Vader said. It wasn't a question. Should we, Dienes asked, genuinely confused. Is it a weapon, a technology? Admiral Yularen stepped forward, her analytical mind trying to process this impossibility. The Force is the energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, that penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. Some individuals are sensitive to it, can manipulate it, draw power from it, use it to enhance physical abilities, predict outcomes, even affect the minds of others. The Jedi once served as peacekeepers using the Force. Now Lord Vader and other Force sensitives serve the Empire. The Federation officers absorbed this in silence. Then Sky Marshal Dienes laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. You're talking about psychic powers, telepathy, telekinesis. That's theoretical physics at best, pseudoscience at worst. There's no scientific evidence for anything like that. No scientific evidence, Vader repeated, and suddenly every loose object in the room, datapads, chairs, even Calic's sidearm, rose into the air. They hung suspended for 3 seconds while the Federation officers stared in shock, then settled gently back into place. Does this constitute sufficient evidence, Sky Marshal? Dienes felt her worldview fracturing. 30 years of military service, combat on a dozen worlds, countless engagements with bugs and political enemies. None of it had prepared her for this asterisk, for a universe where the impossible was merely uncommon. How, she whispered. The Force, Vader said simply, and your people have no connection to it. No midi-chlorians in your blood, no sensitivity to its currents. You are as blind to the Force as the Arachnids. He paused, his respirator hissing. Which raises an interesting question. Are you from a dimension where the Force doesn't exist? General Calic found his voice. We don't have anything like that. No psychics, no telepaths, just humans, technology, and the bugs trying to eat us. If this Force is real, and apparently it is, then yeah, we're from somewhere it doesn't work. Tarkin's mind raced through implications. A human civilization that developed without the Force. No Jedi to guide them. No Sith to corrupt them. Pure technological evolution driven by existential warfare against a species that existed outside the Force entirely. The strategic possibilities were fascinating. The threat assessment was complex. This changes the negotiation, Tarkin said carefully. You're not simply unknown humans from uncharted space. You're refugees from another reality entirely. That makes you both vulnerable and potentially valuable. The Empire could offer you sanctuary, resources, technological exchange. In return, you would submit to Imperial authority and provide intelligence on these Arachnids. Submit, Dienes repeated flatly. You mean surrender, become subjects of your Empire. I mean survival, Sky Marshal. You have 3 damaged ships, 1,500 ground troops, and no way home. We have a galaxy-spanning civilization with resources you cannot imagine. The mathematics are simple. The mathematics, Calic said, his voice dangerous. Assume we're desperate enough to trade freedom for safety. We're not. The Federation exists because humanity decided that liberty was worth fighting for, worth dying for. We've been at war for 30 years and we've never surrendered. Not to the bugs, not to fear, and not to some empire that thinks might makes right. Vader's respirator hissed louder, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. General, you speak of freedom while your own civilization demands military service as the price of citizenship. You speak of liberty while deploying nuclear weapons that kill millions. Your ideology is built on contradictions. Maybe, Calic admitted, but they're asterisk contradictions, our choices, our society. We earn the right to make those decisions through service and sacrifice. What's your empire built on? Fear, conquest. That thing you demonstrated, the Force, used to intimidate people into compliance. Careful, General. Commander Voss's voice carried warning. Lord Vader is patient, but there are limits. Dienes stepped forward again, trying to salvage the negotiation before it collapsed into violence. Governor Tarkin, Lord Vader, Admiral Yularen, we didn't come here to debate philosophy. We came to warn you about a threat that will consume this planet if we don't act. You want intelligence about the Arachnids? Fine. We'll share everything we know. Tactics, biology, weaknesses, but we won't surrender our sovereignty. We're willing to negotiate a mutual defense treaty. coordinate military operations, share technology, but we remain independent. Tarkin studied her with cold calculation. And if we refuse? Then we fight the bugs alone like we've always done. And when they spread beyond our containment, and they will, you'll face them without the benefit of our experience. 300,000 casualties over 30 years. That's what it cost us to learn how to fight them. How many will it cost you? The silence stretched. Outside, sand whispered against the structure's walls. Inside, two civilizations faced each other across an ideological gulf that might be unbridgeable. Finally, Tarkin spoke. Very well, a provisional alliance. You will share all intelligence on the Arachnids. You will coordinate military operations with Imperial Command. In exchange, we will provide technological support, medical resources, and temporary sanctuary for your forces. This arrangement continues until the Arachnid threat is eliminated. After that, we renegotiate. Acceptable, Dienes said, though Galactic looked like he wanted to argue further. One condition, Vader added, his voice carrying finality. Your nuclear weapons will be placed under joint Imperial-Federation control. No orbital bombardment without mutual consent. The Emperor does not tolerate unauthorized strategic weapons in Imperial space. That was non-negotiable, Dienes realized. Pride warred with pragmatism in her mind, but ultimately, pragmatism won. They were stranded, outnumbered, and outgunned. Keeping their nukes under exclusive federal control would just give the Empire an excuse to destroy them. Agreed, joint control. But we want access to your orbital bombardment capabilities as well. If the bugs break containment, we need to hit them fast and hard. Tarkin nodded. Admiral Yularen will coordinate the technical details. Now, the immediate tactical situation. General Galactic, you said your people have experience clearing bug tunnels. Explain your doctrine. Galactic pulled up his own tactical display, showing the Arachnid tunnel networks. The brain bug is the key. Kill it, and the warrior bugs lose coordination. They'll still fight, but they become predictable. Problem is, brain bugs hide deep in the tunnel networks, surrounded by warriors and protected by tankers that can collapse tunnels with acid. Standard approach is to use mobile infantry shock troops to breach the outer defenses. Then send in nuke teams to eliminate the brain bug and collapse the entire network. A nuke team? Yularen looked skeptical. You send soldiers carrying nuclear weapons into close-quarters tunnel combat. Tactical nukes low-yield, usually backpack-mounted. One trooper carries the device, squad provides security. They get close to the brain bug, arm the nuke, and extract. 20-minute timer gives them time to reach minimum safe distance. Galactic's expression darkened. Doesn't always work. Extraction fails, squad gets cut off, timer runs out anyway. Acceptable losses. There was that phrase again. Acceptable losses. The Empire used it. The Federation used it. Two civilizations separated by impossible distances, united by the cold mathematics of war. Lord Vader, Tarkin said thoughtfully, could you sense this brain bug's location through the Force? Vader's respirator hissed in what might have been frustration. No, I sense the void where it exists, the absence of life in the Force, but cannot pinpoint its location precisely. It's like trying to locate a shadow in darkness. You know it's there, but cannot grasp it. Then we do it the Federal way, Commander Voss said. Combined force. Stormtroopers provide heavy firepower, mobile infantry provides tunnel expertise, and we send in a nuke team. If that fails, the Asterisk Devastator provides orbital strike on the entire region. Dienes wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. The bugs were breeding faster than ground forces could eliminate them. Every hour they waited meant more warriors, more tunnels, more infestation. Sometimes the only way to win was through overwhelming force applied without hesitation. How long to prepare the operation? Galactic asked. 12 hours, Voss replied. We'll need to map the tunnel networks, Identify likely brain bug locations and position orbital strike assets. General, I'll need your best tunnel fighters for the assault team. You'll have them. Kalik glanced at Dienes, who nodded reluctantly. This was it, the moment where the Federation committed to working with an authoritarian empire against a common enemy. Temporary alliance, they'd said, but temporary had a way of becoming permanent when survival was at stake. The negotiation continued for another hour, hammering out tactical details, communication protocols, and rules of engagement. By the end, both sides had concessions they didn't like and agreements that made strategic sense, even if they violated ideological principles. As the Imperial delegation prepared to leave, Vader paused at the door and turned to face Sky Marshal Dienes. You fight well for people without the Force. Your soldiers have courage, but courage without power is merely defiance postponing the inevitable. Maybe, Dienes replied, but defiance is what makes us human, whether that's in your galaxy or ours. Vader studied her for a long moment, then left without another word. The door sealed behind the Imperial delegation, leaving the Federation officers alone. I don't trust them, Kalik said immediately. Neither do I, Dienes agreed. But trust is a luxury. Right now, we need their firepower and their orbital assets. We use them, eliminate the bugs, and then we figure out our long-term situation. And if they betray us? Dienes looked out the viewport at the Asterisk Devastator, hanging in orbit like a gray monument to Imperial power. Then we die, but we die fighting, like always. Far from the conference room, in a cave system that human sensors couldn't detect through layers of ionized minerals, the brain bug processed new information. It had learned much from the dead TIE pilot's memories, language, culture, technology, and most importantly, weakness. These new humans, this empire, relied on something called the Force. They believed it gave them advantage, made them superior, but the Arachnids existed outside the Force, invisible to their primary tactical advantage. The brain bug sent pheromone commands to its warriors, new instructions, new tactics. They would avoid direct confrontation. Instead, they would spread through population centers, infest civilian areas where orbital bombardment would kill the Empire's own citizens, force this empire to choose between their people and containment. And while the humans fought among themselves, debating politics and philosophy and acceptable losses, the hive would do what it had always done: breed, adapt, spread, consume. The brain bug burrowed deeper, its workers already excavating new nursery chambers. Within days, 100,000 new warriors would emerge. Within weeks, 1 million. The humans thought they'd negotiated peace between themselves. They thought they'd contained the threat. They were wrong. The Arachnid War had just begun. The assault began at 400 hours Tatooine local time, when the twin suns were still below the horizon, and the desert was as close to cold as it ever got. General Kalik had insisted on darkness. The bugs could see in low light, but so could mobile infantry with their helmet optics, and darkness made orbital strikes less visible to any civilian populations that might panic at the sight of nuclear fire raining from the sky. Corporal Dizzy Flores checked her Morita rifle for the third time, chambered a round, and tried to ignore the knot of fear in her stomach. She'd done tunnel clearance before, on P Station, on Tango Urilla, on a dozen other bug-infested rocks where the brass decided close quarters extermination was more cost-effective than glassing entire regions. But those had been federal operations with federal backup and federal extraction protocols. This time, she was going into the tunnels with Imperial Stormtroopers she barely trusted, fighting under joint command protocols that had been written 6 hours ago, carrying a tactical nuke that would vaporize her along with the brain bug if extraction failed. Acceptable losses, that's what they called it. All units, final comm check, Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled through her helmet speakers. Chen had been promoted to platoon leader after their previous LT got cut in half by a warrior bug during the first engagement. Battlefield promotions were common in the Mobile Infantry. Officers died fast, and someone had to give orders. Flores keyed her mic. Second squad all operational. Around her, the rest of her squad checked in. Private Watkins on point, Sergeant Carrido on heavy weapons, and 5 other troopers who'd survived the past 3 days of constant bug contact. Next to them, a squad of Stormtroopers ran their own checks, their white armor rendered in shades of gray by her night vision. TK-421, Jens, she reminded herself, gave her a thumbs up. They'd fought together twice more since that first desperate defense, and she'd learned he was competent, brave, and deeply uncomfortable with the Empire's doctrine of absolute obedience. He asked questions, made suggestions to officers who weren't used to enlisted personnel showing initiative. It would probably get him killed eventually, but for now, it made him a good soldier to have at your back. Remember the plan, Commander Voss's voice cut through the comm channel, addressing both Imperial and Federal forces. Mobile Infantry takes point, they have tunnel experience. Stormtroopers provide fire support and rear security. We advance to the brain bug's estimated location. The nuke team arms their device, and everyone extracts through the southern tunnels. Once clear, the Asterisk Devastator provides orbital strike to collapse the entire network. Any questions? Flores had about 100 questions, starting with, what if the extraction fails? And ending with, why are we trusting people we were shooting at 3 days ago? But she kept her mouth shut. Questions were for officers. Enlisted personnel just followed orders and tried to stay alive. Move out, Calic ordered, and the joint force descended into hell. The tunnels were wrong. Flores had cleared bug tunnels on 5 different worlds, and they all followed similar patterns. Irregular excavation, organic resin coating the walls, a smell like burning plastic mixed with rotten meat. These tunnels had all that, but they also had something else, a sense of age, as if the bugs had been here far longer than 3 days. The resin was thick, hardened, layered in ways that suggested weeks or months of secretion rather than hours. Command, this is second squad, she reported, advancing with her rifle raised. The tunnels show extensive development, more than our timeline suggests is possible. Calic's response was terse. Noted. Continue advance. Brain bug is prioritized for intelligence extraction before elimination. Before elimination. That was new. Usually the doctrine was simple. Find the brain bug, kill it, collapse the tunnels. But the Empire wanted specimens, wanted to study how something could exist outside their force. The Joint Command had agreed that if possible, they'd capture the brain bug alive. Flores thought that was the stupidest tactical decision she'd ever heard, but nobody asked Mobile Infantry corporals for strategic input. The tunnel descended at a 30-degree angle, the walls pressing in until they had to advance in single file. Her helmet's motion tracker showed contacts ahead, lots of them, moving in patterns that suggested organized defense rather than random wandering. The brain bug knew they were coming. Contact front, Watkins whispered, and a warrior bug exploded from a side passage. The tunnel erupted in muzzle flashes and blaster fire. Flores put 6 rounds into the bug's head. Watkins emptied his magazine into its thorax, and a stormtrooper behind them fired a sustained burst that carved through chitin like a plasma torch through butter. The warrior collapsed, thrashing, and Sergeant Carrido put a burst into its neural cluster to ensure it stayed down. Keep moving, Chen ordered. That was a scout. The real defense is deeper. They advanced over the corpse, and Flores noted something disturbing. The bug had been larger than standard warriors, maybe 10% bigger, with thicker chitin plating and mandibles that looked like they could shear through powered armor without effort. The bugs were adapting, already. The tunnel network became a maze. Passages branched in multiple directions, some barely wide enough to crawl through, others large enough to drive an ATST. Flores' squad took the main passage while other units cleared the branches, their progress marked by sustained gunfire and the occasional scream that cut off too quickly. They found the first Imperial casualties 20 minutes into the advance. A Stormtrooper squad that had pushed too far ahead, gotten separated and been swarmed. The bodies were incomplete. Flores had seen what warrior bugs did to corpses. They didn't just kill, they fed. But these bodies showed evidence of something else, deliberate mutilation. As if the bugs were learning human anatomy, studying weaknesses, adapting their attack patterns. "Jesus," Watkins muttered. "Keep moving," Flores snapped, though her own stomach was churning. The bugs were getting smarter. That was bad. That was very bad. In the Devastator's Command Center, Grand Moff Tarkin watched the tactical display with cold fascination. Each blue dot represented a Federal or Imperial soldier advancing through the tunnels. Each red dot represented confirmed Arachnid contacts, and the ratio was not favorable. "Commander Voss reports heavy resistance," Admiral Yularen said. "Casualties at 12% and climbing. The creatures are defending in depth, using the tunnel architecture to negate our numerical advantage." "Expected," Tarkin replied. "Urban warfare favors the defender, and these tunnels are the creature's natural environment. What concerns me more is this." He gestured at the sensor data showing the tunnel network's extent. "Our estimates were conservative. The infestation is 3 times larger than initial projections suggested." Yularen studied the data, her expression troubled. "Sir, if the creatures have been breeding at this rate for only 3 days..." Then the Sky Marshal was correct. Exponential growth. Within a week, we'll be facing 1 million warriors. Within a month, the entire planet could be infested. Tarkin's fingers drummed against his command console. "Prepare contingency protocols. If the assault fails, we implement orbital bombardment regardless of civilian casualties. The Dune Sea, Mos Eisley, and all settlements within 200 kilometers will be sterilized." "Sir, that's 500,000 Imperial citizens." "It's acceptable losses, Admiral." Tarkin's voice was ice. 500,000 now, or 50 million later when the creatures spread to other systems. The mathematics are simple. Yularen said nothing. She'd served with Tarkin long enough to know when arguments were futile. But she also knew that this decision would haunt the Empire's reputation in the Outer Rim. 500,000 citizens executed to contain a threat most of them didn't know existed. The rebellion would use it in their propaganda for years. Unless, of course, the assault succeeded. On the tactical display, the blue dots continued their slow advance into the red-saturated depths. They found the nursery chamber 40 minutes into the assault, and Flores understood immediately why the bugs had been breeding so fast. The chamber was massive, easily 200 meters across, the ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. The walls were covered in organic pods, each containing a developing warrior bug in various stages of growth. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, and moving among them were worker bugs, smaller organisms that tended the pods, regulated temperature, and fed the developing warriors with partially digested biomass. "Oh my God," someone whispered over the comm. "Target the pods," Chen ordered. "Burn them all." The chamber became an inferno. Flamers ignited the pods in cascading waves, each rupture releasing developmental fluid and half-formed bugs that thrashed briefly before dying. Stormtroopers fired into the worker bugs with systematic precision. Mobile infantry troopers used grenades to collapse sections of wall, burying dozens of pods under tons of rock. But the warriors were coming. Flores could hear them in the tunnels, the clicking of chitin on stone, the chittering communication that passed for bug language. The nursery had been bait. The brain bug had known they'd find it, known they'd stop to destroy it. And now they were trapped in a killing ground. "Defensive positions," Calic's voice boomed through the command channel. "All units fall back to the nursery chamber. Prepare for sustained engagement." The warriors hit them like a tsunami. They came from every tunnel simultaneously, a coordinated assault that showed brain bug tactical sophistication at its peak. Warrior bugs poured into the chamber in waves, their mandibles snapping, their movements fluid despite the confined space. Behind them came hopper bugs, using the warriors as mobile platforms to launch themselves at the human defenders. And emerging from the largest tunnel came something Flores had only seen once before, on Klendathu during the first invasion. A tanker bug, its bloated abdomen swollen with corrosive acid. "Tanker," she screamed, "take it down." Sergeant Carrido's heavy weapon, a Federation man-portable railgun that required powered armor to carry, spoke with a sound like thunder in the enclosed space. The hypervelocity round punched through the tanker's armor and detonated its internal acid reservoir. The resulting explosion vaporized the tanker and the dozen warriors surrounding it, but the acid spray caught 3 stormtroopers who'd been advancing too aggressively. Their armor melted. Their screams were brief. Acceptable losses. The battle devolved into desperate close-quarters chaos. Flores fired until her Morita overheated, switched to her backup sidearm, fired that until empty, then used her combat knife on a hopper bug that got inside her rifle's minimum range. Next to her, Jens fought with his E-11 in one hand and a vibroblade in the other, the powered weapon cutting through chitin with brutal efficiency. "The nuke team," Chen's voice was ragged. "Where's the goddamn nuke team?" Flores looked around wildly and spotted them. 3 mobile infantry troopers trying to reach the far tunnel while carrying the tactical nuclear device between them. They were pinned down by a group of warriors that had cut off their retreat, and the squad assigned to protect them was already half dead. "Second squad on me." Flores didn't wait for orders. She just ran, her powered armor's servos giving her speed that barely kept her ahead of the bug's mandibles. Watkins followed, then Carrito, then the rest of her squad and a handful of stormtroopers including Jens. They hit the warriors from the flank, catching them between the nuke team and their own position. It was brutal, ugly fighting, the kind where you measured success in seconds survived rather than enemies killed. Flores put her rifle barrel against a warrior's eye and fired until the weapon clicked empty. Carrito used his railgun as a club, the powered servos in his armor giving him enough strength to crack chitin with each impact. Jen's vibroblade took a warrior's leg off at the joint, and Watkins finished it with a grenade down its gullet. "Move," Flores screamed at the nuke team. "Get that thing to the brain bug's chamber." They moved, dragging the nuclear device through carnage and chaos while the rest of Second Squad provided covering fire. More bugs came. More soldiers died. Flores lost track of who was Federal and who was Imperial. In the darkness and blood and fire, they were all just humans fighting things that wanted to eat them. The brain bug's chamber was everything Flores expected and worse. The creature sat in the center like a bloated obscenity, its bulk supported by a throne of organic resin. Around it, warrior bugs formed defensive rings, but these were different, larger, faster, with chitin that seemed to shimmer in the emergency lighting. Elite guards. The brain bug had been preparing. "Arm the device," Lieutenant Chen's voice had gone hoarse from shouting. 30-minute timer, everyone extract through the southern tunnels. But the southern tunnels were collapsed. Tanker acid had brought down entire sections, and warriors were already moving to block the remaining exits. They were trapped. Flores felt the cold clarity that came with accepting death. She'd known this might happen. Every mobile infantry trooper knew it. You went into the tunnels, you might not come out. Acceptable losses. Then Vader arrived. The Dark Lord came through the main tunnel like a force of nature. His lightsaber, a blade of pure energy that Flores' training had never prepared her for, cutting through warriors with contemptuous ease. Behind him came elite stormtroopers in black armor, their weapons firing with coordinated precision that turned the brain bug's defensive rings into smoking craters. But Vader himself moved differently than any human Flores had ever seen. He was asterisk fast asterisk, impossibly fast, his blade striking 3 times before her enhanced optics could track the movement. And when warriors tried to swarm him, they simply stopped, hung in the air for a heartbeat, then were torn apart by invisible forces. The Force, that psychic power the Imperials had described. Flores was watching it in action, and it was terrifying. Vader reached the brain bug, his lightsaber raised for the killing blow. "Wait," Admiral Yularen's voice cut through the chaos. "Lord Vader, the Emperor wants it alive. We need specimens for study." The brain bug's proboscis extended toward Vader, seeking to penetrate his helmet and extract his memories the way it had with the TIE pilot. Vader caught the proboscis in one gloved hand, and Flores heard the creature's chittering rise to a shriek of pain or fear or rage. "You want to feed on my thoughts?" Vader's voice was death itself. "Then feed." Flores didn't understand what happened next. The brain bug convulsed, its entire body going rigid, and then it collapsed, folded in on itself like a balloon with the air let out. When Vader released it, the creature was alive but catatonic, its neural functions reduced to basic survival instinct. "Specimen secured," Vader said coldly. "Extraction teams contain it. All personnel evacuate immediately." The nuke team was frantically trying to disarm their device. The brain bug was supposedly neutralized, the mission objective achieved. But the timer had already been activated, and Federal tactical nukes didn't have remote deactivation protocols. Security feature to prevent enemy tampering. "We can't shut it down," the lead technician screamed. 26 minutes and counting." Vader turned to face the nuke team, and Flores felt pressure in the air, as if reality itself was being compressed. "How much time do we need?" "Sir, the blast radius at this depth will collapse every tunnel in a 5-kilometer radius. We need at least 30 minutes to evacuate all personnel to minimum safe distance. Then we accelerate the evacuation." Vader gestured, and suddenly Flores felt herself lifted asterisk, pulled through the tunnels by invisible hands that moved her faster than her powered armor's servos could manage. All around her, soldiers from both sides were being grabbed by the Force and dragged toward the surface like children's toys pulled on strings. It was violation on a fundamental level. Her body moving without her control, her agency stripped away by power she couldn't comprehend or resist. But it was also salvation. They covered in 5 minutes what would have taken 30 on foot. When Flores finally hit the surface, gasping and disoriented, she looked back at the tunnel entrance. Vader was the last one out, emerging just as the tactical nuke detonated deep underground. The Dune Sea moved. The ground rippled like water, dunes collapsing and reforming as the shockwave propagated outward. The tunnel entrance vomited fire and smoke, and then the ground subsided as thousands of tons of rock collapsed into the void where the bug tunnels had been. Silence, for the first time in 3 days, absolute silence. No chittering, no clicking, no screams. "Casualties," Calic's voice was exhausted. The numbers came back. 47 Mobile infantry dead, 83 stormtroopers, another 100 wounded from both sides, acceptable losses for an objective achieved. But as Flores sat in the sand, her armor covered in bug ichor and her hands shaking from adrenaline crash, she wondered whose acceptable losses they were. The brass made decisions based on statistics and strategic value. The soldiers paid the price in blood and trauma. On the Normandy asterisk, Sky Marshal Dienes watched the tactical report and tried to feel victorious. The brain bug was captured. The tunnel network was destroyed. Estimated warrior bug casualties in the hundreds of thousands, maybe enough to break the infestation's exponential growth. But her tactical displays were also showing something the ground forces hadn't seen yet. New tunnel networks, starting from locations 5 kilometers outside the blast radius, different heat signatures, different excavation patterns. There had been more than one brain bug. "Admiral Yularen," she said into the command channel, Are you seeing this? There was a pause, then Yularen's voice, carefully controlled. Confirmed. Secondary infestations detected in 7 locations across the Dune Sea. Assessment: we destroyed 1 hive. The Arachnids established multiple colonies. Dienes felt something break inside her. They'd sacrificed 130 soldiers, deployed a tactical nuke, used the Empire's most powerful force user, and they'd barely scratched the surface. The bugs had outplayed them, used 1 hive as bait while establishing others beyond strike range. Recommendations? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Tarkin's voice cut in, cold and final. Base Delta Zero, full planetary sterilization. The Asterisk Devastator will begin bombardment in 6 hours. All Imperial personnel will evacuate designated zones. Federal forces, he paused. Federal forces are advised to do the same. You're going to kill 500,000 people, Dienes said flatly. I'm going to save billions. The creatures have proven they can outbreed conventional containment. Orbital bombardment is the only solution. Your own doctrine agrees, Sky Marshal. You've done the same on your colony worlds. He was right. God help her, he was right. The Federation had glassed 3 colonies when bug infestations got out of control. Acceptable losses, the needs of the many, all the phrases that let you sleep at night after authorizing genocide. How long do civilians have to evacuate? She asked. 4 hours. Those who can leave will leave. Those who cannot. Tarkin didn't finish the sentence. Down on the surface, Corporal Flores looked up at the stars and wondered which one was the Asterisk Devastator. Wondered if this was how it ended, not in glorious battle against the bugs, but in fire from orbit, vaporized along with the enemy and the innocent and everyone caught in between. Acceptable losses. She was so tired of that phrase. In the ruins of Mos Eisley's cantina, a moisture farmer named Owen Lars argued with his wife about whether to evacuate. The Imperial broadcast had been clear: leave now or die in 6 hours. But leaving meant abandoning their farm, their livelihood, everything they'd built. We have to go, Beru pleaded. Think of Luke, he's just a boy. We can rebuild, but we can't come back from being vaporized. Owen looked at his nephew, a sandy-haired kid who dreamed of adventure and complained about farm work, and made his decision. They would leave, take what they could carry and run. He didn't know that this decision would save the boy who would one day destroy the Death Star and redeem Darth Vader. He just knew that some losses were not acceptable. Across Tatooine, hundreds of thousands made similar calculations. Some evacuated, some refused, some didn't get the message in time. And in orbit, the Asterisk Devastator's Asterisk turbolaser batteries powered up, preparing to render judgment on a world that had become a battlefield through no choice of its own. The alliance between Empire and Federation had achieved its objective. The brain bug was captured, intelligence was secured, but the cost was still being tallied, and the bill would come due in fire and ash. Total war had come to the Star Wars galaxy, and neither side was prepared for what it would demand. The evacuation of Mos Eisley was chaos incarnate. Imperial transport shuttles descended through Tatooine's atmosphere in waves, their holds designed for cargo but now crammed with refugees who'd abandoned everything except what they could carry. Humans, Rhodians, Twi'leks, Jawas, even a few Hutts who'd bribed their way onto the first transports, all of them flowing toward the spaceport in a river of desperation. Stormtroopers maintained order with blaster rifles and crowd control barriers, but it was a fragile order, the kind that could shatter into violence at any moment. Corporal Dizzy Flores stood at the spaceport's northern perimeter, her powered armor making her a visible deterrent to anyone thinking about jumping the queue. Next to her, TK-421, Jens, watched the crowds with an expression she'd learned to read even through his helmet, guilt mixed with helpless anger. "This isn't what I signed up for," he said quietly. When I enlisted, they told us we'd bring order to the galaxy, peace, security, not this. Flores understood. She'd felt the same way after her first colony evacuation, watching civilians flee while mobile infantry held the perimeter against bug advance. The propaganda said you were a hero. The reality said you were a witness to tragedy, powerless to stop it. How long until bombardment? She asked. 3 hours, 40 minutes. Jens checked his chrono. Most of the settlements will evacuate in time, but the moisture farms, the remote homesteads, the people who don't trust imperial authority, he trailed off. Those people would die, vaporized by turbolaser fire that would turn sand to glass and rock to vapor. Acceptable losses. The phrase haunted Flores like a ghost that wouldn't stop whispering. A commotion near the main gate drew her attention. A family, human, 3 children ranging from maybe 5 to 15 standard years, was being turned away by a stormtrooper officer. The father was shouting, gesturing at his youngest child who looked sick, pale, struggling to breathe. No room, the officer was saying. Every transport is at maximum capacity. You'll have to wait for the next wave. There won't be a next wave, the father screamed. The bombardment starts in less than 4 hours. Please, my daughter needs medical attention. Not my problem, citizen. Step back or be removed by force. Flores felt something snap inside her. She'd followed orders for 3 days, watched soldiers die in tunnels, seen the Empire demonstrate power that made the Federation look like primitives. And now she was supposed to stand here and watch a child die because some Imperial logistics officer decided the transport was at maximum capacity. Fuck that. She strode toward the commotion, her powered armor's servos giving her movement and authority that made the crowd part. The stormtrooper officer turned to face her, and she saw his designation, TK-1447, a captain by his pauldron markings. This doesn't concern you, Federal, he said coldly. Return to your post. That transport, Flores said, pointing at the vessel in question. How much over capacity is it? 17%. Acceptable for short-range flight, but regulations state. I don't care about your regulations. That child is sick. She needs medical care. And you're telling me she has to wait because of a * capacity regulation. The captain's posture stiffened. Corporal, you're a guest in Imperial space. You don't give me orders. Now return to your post before I report this insubordination. Flores looked at the family, the father's desperate eyes, the mother holding her sick daughter, the 2 older children trying not to cry. She thought about all the times she'd followed orders that didn't make sense, all the acceptable losses she'd tallied, all the humanity she'd sacrificed in service to doctrine. She made her choice. Jens, she said quietly, you with me on this? TK-421 looked at her, then at the family, then at his captain. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he unslung his E-11 blaster rifle and held it in a non-threatening but ready position. Sir, he said to TK-1447, I believe there's room on that transport. Regulations can be flexible during emergency operations. The captain's hand moved toward his sidearm. Around them, other stormtroopers were watching, waiting to see which way this would break. And in the crowd, hundreds of refugees held their breath, hopping for mercy from soldiers who'd been trained to show none. You're both court-martialed, TK-1447 said. Effective immediately. Step aside or I'll have you. You'll have us what? Flores interrupted. Arrested, executed. Captain, in 3 hours this planet gets glassed. You really want to spend your last moments here enforcing capacity regulations? The standoff stretched. Then, from the transport's loading ramp, another voice called out. Captain TK-1447, this is Commander Voss. Stand down. Everyone turned. Voss emerged from the transport, his armor scorched from the tunnel fighting, his expression unreadable. He looked at the family, at Flores and Jens, at the captain whose authority had just been undermined. "Load them," Voss ordered, "and anyone else who can fit. Capacity regulations are suspended for emergency evacuation." "Sir, protocol states." "Protocol states I'm the ranking officer on site, Captain. Load them. That's an order." TK-1447's jaw worked behind his helmet, but he saluted and stepped aside. The father grabbed his daughter and rushed toward the transport, the rest of his family following. Around the spaceport, the crowd surged forward, hope replacing desperation as other stormtroopers began waving people through. Voss approached Flores and she prepared for the reprimand. Instead, he extended his hand. "Thank you, Corporal. You reminded me why I became a soldier." Flores shook his hand, confused. "Sir, we're supposed to protect people. Somewhere along the way, the Empire forgot that. Maybe you Federals can remind us." He looked toward the sky where the Asterisk Devastator hung in orbit. "If we survive what's coming." Aboard the Normandy Asterisk, Sky Marshal Dienes faced the hardest decision of her career. The tactical display showed 7 confirmed bug hives spreading across Tatooine, maybe more that sensors couldn't detect. Imperial evacuation was proceeding, but would be incomplete when bombardment began. And her own forces, what was left of them, were being offered evacuation slots on Imperial transports. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Shaw said carefully, "General Kalik is requesting permission to deploy Federal tactical teams to the remaining hives. He believes we can replicate the tunnel assault, eliminate multiple brain bugs before bombardment begins." Dienes studied the tactical projection. The assault on the first hive had cost 130 casualties for 1 brain bug. 7 hives meant potentially over 900 casualties, 60% of her remaining effective force. And even then, no guarantee of success. The bugs were learning, adapting. The second assault would face improved defenses. The mathematics were simple, the choice was not. "Denied," she said finally. "We've lost enough people. The Empire has the firepower to handle this. We extract our forces and reassess once the bombardment is complete." Shaw looked like she wanted to argue but held her tongue. Kalik wouldn't be so diplomatic. The general had already made his opinion clear. The Federation didn't abandon fights, didn't retreat when bugs needed killing, didn't let other civilizations handle their messes. But Dienes wasn't sending her people into 7 more suicide runs. She'd watched the casualty reports come in, read the names of soldiers who died fighting bugs in a galaxy that wasn't theirs, defending people who weren't their citizens. At some point, pragmatism had to override pride. Her comm console chimed, Tarkin's frequency. She activated it with growing unease. "Sky Marshal," Tarkin's voice was its usual calculated coldness. "The Emperor has reviewed our initial reports on the Arachnids. He wishes to speak with you directly." Dienes felt ice in her veins. The Emperor, the figure who ruled this entire galaxy-spanning civilization, who commanded powers she still didn't fully understand. "When?" "Now I'm patching you through." Before she could protest, the holoprojector activated, and a figure appeared. The image was distorted slightly, security protocols, probably, but she could make out a robed figure with a face that looked ancient and somehow wrong, as if age had corrupted it into something barely human. "Sky Marshal Dienes." The voice was cultured, almost grandfatherly, but with an undertone that made her skin crawl. "I am Emperor Palpatine. Your presence in my galaxy has proven illuminating." "Your Majesty." Dienes defaulted to military courtesy, unsure what protocol applied when addressing interdimensional dictators. "I apologize for the circumstances of our arrival. We never intended to bring the Arachnid threat to your territory." "Intentions are irrelevant. Results are what matter." The Emperor's image leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Sky Marshal, these creatures that exist outside the Force, how long have you been fighting them?" 32 years of sustained warfare, hundreds of engagements across dozens of worlds. And you've survived, not merely survived, maintained a coherent civilization despite facing an enemy that breeds exponentially and cannot be sensed through mystical means. The Emperor's tone shifted, becoming almost respectful. That suggests remarkable resilience, or perhaps remarkable ruthlessness. Dienes met his gaze through the hologram. We do what's necessary, acceptable losses, strategic sacrifice, whatever it takes to ensure humanity's survival. Yes, acceptable losses. The Emperor seemed pleased. A philosophy I appreciate. Governor Tarkin shares it. Lord Vader understands it. But so few others in this galaxy truly grasp that difficult choices define the difference between civilization and extinction. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm extending an offer. The Emperor's voice dropped, becoming intimate, conspiratorial. Your people are stranded in my galaxy. You possess knowledge of warfare against an enemy my forces cannot sense. And you operate without the Force, which makes you uniquely valuable for certain operations. Join the Empire, not as subjects but as allies. Share your expertise. Help us eliminate the Arachnid threat. And in return, I will provide resources to establish your Federation as a recognized entity within Imperial space. It was everything Dienes had been hopping for since they arrived. Legitimacy, resources, a path forward that didn't end in subjugation or extinction. But she'd been negotiating with politicians and military brass long enough to know that offers this generous always came with hidden costs. "What's the catch?" she asked bluntly. The Emperor's smile was not reassuring. Merely cooperation. Your mobile infantry would operate under joint Imperial-Federal command. Your nuclear arsenal would be integrated with Imperial strategic weapons, and your expertise in total warfare would be made available to certain Imperial projects that require discretion. Black Ops, deniable operations, the kind of missions where acceptable losses became complete expendability. Dienes had authorized enough of those in her own career to recognize the proposal for what it was. "I need to consult with my command staff," she said carefully. "Of course, but Sky Marshal, consider this. The alternative is watching your people slowly die in a galaxy where they have no home, no reinforcements, and no future. I offer you a future. The price is merely cooperation with an empire that shares your understanding of necessary sacrifice." The hologram cut out, leaving Dienes alone with her thoughts and the weight of a choice that would define her people's fate. On Tatooine's surface, General Galactic stood at the edge of the bombing zone and watched the sunset. In 2 hours, this entire region would be vaporized. The Dune Sea would become a sea of glass. And somewhere in the tunnels below, tens of thousands of warrior bugs would die without ever understanding what killed them. He thought about the soldiers he'd lost, the 63 mobile infantry troopers who'd followed his orders into tunnels that became their tombs. He knew their names, knew their histories, knew which ones had families back in federal space and which ones were orphans who'd enlisted for citizenship and a sense of belonging. Acceptable losses, but they'd never felt acceptable. They'd felt like failure. "General," Commander Voss approached, his white armor catching the sunset's orange glow. "My scouts report the remaining hives are accelerating their spread. If we don't begin bombardment soon, they'll reach population centers we haven't evacuated." "How many civilians still in the target zones?" Voss's pause told Galactic everything. Estimated 40 to 50,000. Remote settlements, people who refused evacuation, those who didn't receive the warning in time. 50,000. Not soldiers, not combatants, just people trying to survive on a desert world that had suddenly become a battlefield. "Commander," Galactic said slowly, "what if there's another option?" "Sorry." "You're Lord Vader. I saw what he did in those tunnels. The Force, the power he demonstrated, he tore through warriors like they were nothing. What if we send him to the remaining hives, targeted strikes instead of mass bombardment? Voss shook his head. General, Lord Vader is powerful, but he's one person. 7 hives with potentially hundreds of thousands of warriors each. Even he has limits. And the bugs, they exist outside the Force. He can't sense them coming, can't predict their movements. It would be suicide. Would it? Kalak turned to face the Imperial commander. Or would it be what you said earlier, remembering why we became soldiers? To protect people, not just follow the most efficient doctrine. General, I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm volunteering my remaining mobile infantry, Kalak interrupted. All of them. We hit the 7 hives simultaneously. Your Lord Vader leads one assault, my best squads hit the others. We go deep, we go fast, and we eliminate those brain bugs before they can coordinate a defense. It'll cost us, probably most of my remaining force, but it might save those 50,000 civilians. Voss stared at him. You'd sacrifice your people to save Imperial citizens you don't know. I'd sacrifice them to save people, period. Kalak's voice was steel. That's what the mobile infantry does. We stand between humanity and extinction. Doesn't matter which humanity, doesn't matter which galaxy, we do the job. For a long moment, Voss said nothing. Then he keyed his comm. Lord Vader, this is Commander Voss. I have a tactical proposal that requires your immediate attention. In the Devastator's meditation chamber, Vader listened to the proposal and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Respect for someone without the Force. The general's plan was tactically sound but strategically suicidal. Simultaneous assaults on 7 hives with minimal forces and maximum risk. The mobile infantry would be slaughtered. Most wouldn't survive the first 10 minutes. The remainder would die in the tunnels, buying time for evacuation and denying the Arachnids their exponential growth. It was exactly the kind of sacrifice Vader himself would make, had made repeatedly throughout his service to the Empire. The willingness to accept death as a tactical tool to spend lives, including your own, in pursuit of victory. I will lead the primary assault, Vader said, but inform General Kalak that I require only a minimal support element. His forces should focus on the secondary hives where my presence is not required. Lord Vader, Tarkin's voice cut in. He'd been monitoring from the bridge. The Emperor wants specimens from multiple hives. If we destroy all 7 brain bugs, we lose valuable research opportunities. Then we capture one and kill the rest, Vader replied. The civilians' lives outweigh research value. There was a pause. Then Tarkin said coldly, I disagree, but the decision is yours. Be aware that the Emperor may question this prioritization. Let him, Vader stood, his cape swirling. I have questioned many of my choices. Prioritizing research over civilian lives will not be one of them. He cut the comm and prepared for deployment. Around him, the meditation chamber's walls seemed to close in, and for just a moment, Vader felt an echo of something he'd buried long ago. A memory of a sandy-haired boy on Tatooine who'd wanted to free slaves and protect the innocent. A Jedi Knight who'd believed in mercy and redemption. That boy was dead. That Jedi was gone. But perhaps in this moment, Vader could honor what they'd believed in, even if it meant defying the Emperor's wishes. The simultaneous assault began at sunset. 7 strike teams descended into 7 hives, while Imperial transports continued evacuating the last civilians. General Kalak led the mobile infantry personally, his command squad hitting the largest secondary hive with the kind of desperate courage that defined the Federation's military tradition. Corporal Flores was with him, along with Jens and the remnants of 2nd Squad. They fought through tunnels that had learned from the first assault, past defenses that adapted in real time, against warriors that seemed to anticipate every tactic the mobile infantry employed. The bugs were learning faster than humans could adapt. Flores lost Watkins to a tanker's acid spray. Lost Sergeant Corrido to a warrior ambush. Lost count of how many magazines she'd emptied, how many bugs she'd killed, how many times she'd almost died. The tunnel became a blur of violence and survival instinct, and somewhere in that blur, she stopped being a soldier following orders and became something more primitive, an animal fighting for its life. When they finally reached the brain bug's chamber, smaller than the first hive, less developed, General Kalik armed the tactical nuke himself. 30-minute timer, he announced. Everyone extract, that's an order. But the southern tunnels were collapsed. The eastern tunnels were swarming with warriors, and the western tunnels led deeper into the hive, not out. They were trapped. Sir, Flora said quietly, we're not getting out. Kalik looked at his remaining squad, 12 troopers from the 40 who'd entered. He looked at the nuke's timer, counting down. He looked at the brain bug, already trying to coordinate warrior reinforcements. Then we hold here, he said. We hold until the timer runs out. We make sure this brain bug doesn't escape, and we make it count. Across Tatooine, similar scenes played out. Mobile infantry squads trapped in hives, choosing to die in place rather than let brain bugs survive. Imperial support teams extracting what soldiers they could, mourning those they couldn't. And at the primary hive, Lord Vader carved through Arachnid defenses like a dark avatar of death, his lightsaber and force powers turning the bug assault into a massacre. When the tactical nukes detonated simultaneously across the Dune Sea, they lit up the twilight like 7 new suns. The ground shook, the tunnels collapsed, and hundreds of mobile infantry troopers died, ensuring that the Arachnid infestation would not spread beyond this world. Acceptable losses, but for once chosen freely. Sacrificed not because doctrine demanded it, but because soldiers decided that some lives were worth dying for. Sky Marshal Dienes watched the detonations from the Normandy's Asterisk Bridge and felt something break that could never be repaired. General Kalik was dead. 2/3 of her mobile infantry were dead. The Third Fleet's ground forces had been effectively annihilated. But the civilians were evacuated. The hives were destroyed. And somewhere in the Empire's vast bureaucracy, 50,000 people would wake up tomorrow because Federal soldiers chose their lives over doctrine. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Shaw said quietly, "the Emperor is awaiting your response to his proposal." Dienes looked at the death toll, looked at the refugee transports ascending from Tatooine's surface, looked at the Asterisk Devastator Asterisk, waiting in orbit with turbolasers still charged but no longer needed. She made her choice. "Patch me through to Emperor Palpatine," she ordered, "and get me Commander Voss. I want to negotiate terms, not surrender asterisk terms asterisk. The Federation will cooperate with the Empire, but on our own principles. We'll fight your wars, face your enemies, and accept your losses, but we do it as equals or we don't do it at all." It was a gamble, a desperate, probably futile gamble, but General Kalik had taught her something in his final act. Some principles were worth dying for, and if the Empire wanted the Federation's expertise in total warfare, they'd have to accept that the Federation didn't kneel. Not to bugs, not to fear, and not to emperors. In the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, Palpatine listened to Sky Marshal Dienes' counteroffer and smiled. The woman had backbone. Her general had demonstrated tactical brilliance and personal sacrifice, and their soldiers had proven they could face the Arachnids, the blind spot in the Force, without the mystical advantages the Empire relied upon. "Acceptable," he said simply. "Welcome to the Galactic Empire, Sky Marshal. I believe our partnership will prove mutually beneficial." He cut the transmission and turned to the viewscreen showing Tatooine's desert surface, now scarred with 7 glass craters where nuclear fire had baptized a world in acceptable losses. The Federation would serve the Empire, would provide expertise, tactical knowledge, and most importantly, proof that the Force was not absolute. That power could be challenged, limits exceeded and new paths forged. And when the time came, when Palpatine had extracted everything of value from these dimensional refugees, they would learn the true cost of making deals with Sith Lords. But that was a lesson for another day. For now, the Arachnid threat was contained, the Federation was integrated, and the Empire had acquired a new weapon in its arsenal, soldiers who understood that acceptable losses sometimes meant sacrificing everything. The galaxy would never be the same. The Battle of Tatooine, as Imperial historians would later record it, lasted 72 hours and claimed the lives of 437 Stormtroopers, 942 mobile infantry troopers, and an estimated 300,000 Arachnid organisms. The engagement demonstrated both the Empire's overwhelming firepower and the limitations of conventional doctrine against an enemy that existed outside the Force. In the months that followed, the Terran Federation established a formal protectorate within Imperial space, nominally independent, practically integrated into the Empire's military-industrial complex. Mobile infantry advisors trained Imperial forces in anti-Arachnid tactics, though the Empire's strategic analysts privately noted that the bug's inability to spread beyond Tatooine suggested the dimensional breach had been a singular event. The captured brain bugs became research subjects in classified Imperial facilities, their biology studied by scientists who sought to understand how life could exist beyond the Force's influence. Sky Marshal Dienes negotiated hard for her people's autonomy, and surprisingly, Emperor Palpatine granted most of her requests. The Federation maintained its own command structure, its own citizenship requirements, its own military doctrine. In exchange, Federal forces became the Empire's specialists for containment operations, unconventional warfare, and missions where Force sensitivity was a liability rather than an advantage. Some called it collaboration, others called it survival. The truth, as always in war, was more complicated. Corporal Dizzy Flores received a commendation from both Federal and Imperial command for her actions during the evacuation. She declined promotion, preferring to remain with her squad, or what was left of it. Jens, the stormtrooper designated TK-421, requested transfer to Federal liaison duties and was granted special dispensation to serve alongside mobile infantry units. His reports back to Imperial command painted a picture of a military culture built on sacrifice, citizenship through service, and the kind of ideological commitment the Empire claimed to possess but rarely demonstrated. Commander Voss was promoted to Admiral and given command of joint Imperial-Federal operations. He would spend the rest of his career trying to reconcile two philosophies of warfare that agreed on acceptable losses but disagreed on everything else. Sometimes he succeeded, often he failed. Always he remembered the family at the spaceport and the choice between doctrine and humanity. Lord Vader returned to hunting Jedi survivors and crushing rebel cells, but something had changed in him. He'd seen soldiers without the Force face horrors that would break Force sensitives. He'd watched humans from another reality sacrifice themselves for people they'd never met, for a civilization that wasn't theirs, for principles that transcended survival. It was a small crack in his armor of darkness, but cracks had a way of spreading. And on Tatooine, beneath the 7 glass craters that scarred the Dune Sea like infected wounds, something stirred in depths the nuclear fire hadn't reached. A single egg, protected by layers of rock and resin, containing genetic memory of everything the hive had learned, everything the brain bugs had extracted from human minds, everything the Arachnids would need to adapt, evolve, and eventually return. Because the bugs always returned, that was the lesson the Terran Federation had learned over 30 years of total war. You could win battles, could glass planets, could sacrifice millions in pursuit of victory, but you could never truly eliminate them. You could only delay the inevitable. The Star Wars galaxy had faced Sith Lords and Jedi, rebels and Empire, countless wars across thousands of years. Now it had encountered something new, An enemy that cared nothing for politics, nothing for power, nothing for the Force itself. An enemy that simply consumed, bred, and spread like a cancer through flesh and steel and the very fabric of civilization. Some called the Federation's arrival a disaster. Others called it destiny. The truth, as always, lay somewhere between. The Arachnids had come to the galaxy far, far away. And like everything they touched, the galaxy would never be the same. The question was not whether humanity would survive. Both the Empire and the Federation had proven they would pay any price for survival. The question was what they would become in the process, what they would sacrifice, what lines they would cross, what acceptable losses they would tally in the name of a future that grew darker with each compromise. War had changed, the enemy had changed, and somewhere in the space between doctrines and desperate choices, humanity itself was changing. Whether that change led to salvation or damnation remained to be seen. But the soldiers who fought in the tunnels, who died in the darkness, who chose civilian lives over military doctrine, they had already given their answer. Some losses were never acceptable. Some choices defined who you were. And sometimes, the only way to win was to refuse the mathematics of sacrifice and fight for something beyond survival. Fight for what it meant to be human. In any galaxy, in any reality, against any enemy. That was the lesson written in blood and atomic fire across Tatooine's scarred surface. That was the legacy of the first contact between the Star Wars galaxy and the Terran Federation. And that was the beginning of a war that would reshape both civilizations in ways neither could predict. The Force would remember, the Hive would remember, and humanity, in all its flawed, contradictory, magnificent forms, would face tomorrow uncertain of victory but certain of purpose. To protect, to survive, to choose. Even when the choice cost everything.